Chapter 528. Han Shao was a little surprised and had a puzzled look on his face. These assault spaceships were clearly his spoils of war, so why did Barrett suddenly want to interfere? Many guesses quickly flashed through his mind, but they were all eliminated one by one. Just a few small assault spaceships were far from enough to make Ghidorah jealous. Could it be that Barrett needed these spaceships to expand his spoils of war? The chances did not seem high. Based on their performance in the previous battle, although Barrett did not care about Blue Star, he still had basic respect for Han Shao. It did not seem like he would fall out with him over these small spoils of war. Barrett's expression was very natural, and he did not have any guilty conscience. This made Han Shao quite curious, and he emphasized, "Are you sure these assault spaceships are your spoils of war? Why do I seem to remember that I was the one who took them down?" Indeed. Barrett nodded and said, "But according to the regulations and procedures, all the losses of Darkstar on the Calamity planets are counted as Ghidorah's spoils of war. This is the basic requirement for us to protect the Calamity planet." Regulations and procedures? Oh, this is the Disaster Relief Operation Manual formulated by the War Bureau. The rules set by Ghidorah, and you want me to follow them? Han Shao raised his eyebrows. You gave up on Blue Star at the crucial moment, which led to the enemy's assault team entering the atmosphere. In the end, I was the one who repelled the enemy. Barrett shook his head and said in a deep voice, "We did not give up. That was just a tactic to put pressure on the enemy. After all, it was too late to go back and help. The battlefield is constantly changing, and we can only take appropriate actions at the right time. If not for my fleet holding back most of Darkstar's forces, you would have to face enemies several times larger than you. Even if we were to talk about contribution, we would still be the one who contributed more. I hope you can cooperate with me." Han Shao narrowed his eyes. Indeed, without Ghidorah's fleet facing the enemy head-on, he would have to face more than a small assault team, and it would be very difficult to achieve the current result. Ghidorah was here to protect the planet, so naturally, he was not willing to work for nothing. Even if it was the spoils of war from the Calamity planets, he still had to hand it over to them. It sounded quite reasonable, but if he had to follow Ghidorah's so-called rules and procedures, the prerequisite was that he was also part of the Blue Star regime that was being protected. However, although Han Shao was protecting the Blue Star, he was an independent force. Ghidorah's so-called rules could not control him. It was impossible for him to obey, and there was no need for him to swallow his pride. You don't seem to understand one thing. I'm a galactic mercenary group, Floating Dragon Islands field team. I'm not a native planet government that you can order around. Han Zhao's eyes narrowed as he slowly said, "So, what right do you have to order me around?" Barrett's expression froze, and he stared at Han Shao closely. His expression changed several times. This was a pure conflict of position. The two of them stared at each other, neither of them willing to back down. Barrett wanted to be more firm, but in front of the famous Black Star, he could not show a condescending attitude. After all, Han Zhao's position in the galaxy was far from what he could compare to. One was a well-known officer under Floating Dragon Island, while the other was just an ordinary commander in Ghidorah's War Bureau. The situation attracted the attention of the surrounding people. The mercenaries, Ghidorah soldiers, and players all gathered around, especially the players. They had already turned on the recording function, and the one who stood in the most eye-catching position was Pork Bun, always at the front line of the news. What happened? At this time, Nagajan rushed over after hearing the news. Barrett helplessly recounted the entire process. He felt that he did not make any mistakes, and he had come over to seize the spoils of war according to the operation manual. He did not expect that Han Shao would not fall for his trick, and he was in a difficult position. However, now that the high-ranking official Nagajan had arrived, Barrett heaved a sigh of relief. Who knew that after listening to the entire process, Nagajin would have a dissatisfied expression and yell angrily, "Barrett, are you an idiot?" Barrett was stunned. If not for Black Star participating in the battle, we could only watch as the Dark Star fleet slipped away. "Who do you think helped us seize the Dark Star command ship?" Nagajin loudly reprimanded Barrett. His position was higher, and he had the qualifications to reprimand others. Previously, Barrett did not listen to his commands, and Nagajin was already somewhat dissatisfied. Now, he could use this as a pretext to make a fuss. Black Star's position and strength could not be underestimated. Nagajin was not willing to affect his good relationship with Black Star because of such a small matter. His position was higher than Barrett's, and he represented Ghidorah's higher-ups to reprimand Barrett. This was a good way for both parties to step down. Barrett thought that Nagajin would speak up for him, but he did not expect him to stand on Black Star's side. He was immediately depressed, but he did not want to interrupt Nagajin. He had an awkward expression on his face. After reprimanding Barrett, Nagajin turned to Han Xiao and said, "This is a misunderstanding." "I guess so." Han Xiao chuckled. "Deal with your spoils of war to your heart's content. We will not interfere. Ghidorah never mistreats its friends." Nagajin nodded, threw a tacit glance, and dragged Barrett away. Seeing that this disturbance had been resolved, the surrounding people heaved a sigh of relief. Everyone was still a little nervous about the conflict between the two guardians. Han Xiao narrowed his eyes and watched Ghidorah's people leave. He did not say much and called the mercenaries to board the assault ship to check on the damage. Only with strength could one obtain respect. If he was an unknown person today, Nagajin would not speak up for him. Han Xiao was very clear about this point. He would not be grateful to Nagajin because of this small matter. This group of Ghidorah people were basically the same. They were high and mighty, judged the situation, bullied the weak, and feared the strong. Speaking of which, most civilizations and governments were like this, and there was nothing strange about it. Now, Nagajin's attitude proved that his actions had finally brought him back to a position that Ghidorah would take seriously. The results were remarkable. Han Xiao did not become complacent because of this and remained calm. He was very clear that status needed the support of strength. As long as he was strong enough, others would automatically give him the respect that he deserved. The small conflict that happened here was quickly spread to the Six Nations through various channels. When the upper echelons of the Six Nations saw Ghidorah's respect for Han Xiao and thought about their own marginal positions, they could not help but yearn for Han Xiao's position even more. They were even more certain that their decision to agree to Black Star's request was correct. On the players' forums, some people asked Ghidorah's people and mercenaries for information and basically reconstructed the process of the attack. They naturally did not like Dark Star, which caused them to delay the progress of the main storyline mission. Furthermore, Ghidorah's actions of abandoning them at the crucial moment made the players even more unhappy. Only Han Xiao's performance did not disappoint the players. Not only did he defeat the enemy, but he also captured Dark Star's commander. It could not be said that he had turned the tide, but he could be considered a mainstay. The players already had a good impression of Han Xiao. After these posts were published, his image was raised by a few levels. As the saying goes, there is no harm if there is no comparison. It was all due to the contrast of those in the same industry. This kind of reliable persona had always been very popular. In addition, he had a good temperament, a good image, a good voice, and a handsome face. His every movement exuded a strong charisma. Han Xiao felt that he could attract a large number of female fans this time. Actually, he did not mind being a hooligan. It did not matter if he was a fan or not. He would not reject anyone. However, this did not lead to more players wanting to join the Black Star Mercenary, because almost everyone wanted to join. After such a long period of operation, the Blue Star market was basically in the shape of Han Xiao. What was left was to continue maintaining it and continuously refresh the player's impression of him. If he wanted other players' channels, he would have to open up a new market. Naturally, now was not the time. While the impact of this incident was spreading among the players, Han Shao checked the 9 assault spaceship. The mercenaries had gone too far, and the internal damage was quite serious. The artificial intelligence system also needed to be replaced with buzz monsters. After the repairs were completed, the spaceships could only be used. Coincidentally, the wreckage of the assault spaceships that crashed in different locations of Blue Star were all materials, so Han Shao did not need to spend money to buy them. The coordinates of the crash covered half of the planet. Some fell into the sea and some fell on the ground. These positions could be locked onto by the spaceship's radar. Han Shao sent a group of mercenaries to drive transport spaceships to salvage them, and all the wreckage could be recovered in 2 to 3 days. Han Shao did not follow the team. After leveling up to virtual mechanic, he could fuse many valuable blueprints. He stayed in the sanctuary and prepared to build some new machines. After this attack, Dark Star would not visit Blue Star again in the near future. He estimated that he could relax for a while. Andrea Continent, Germinal Organization Base ruins. Not long ago, a fiery meteor fell from the sky and landed heavily on the charred ground, creating a ravine that was hundreds of meters long. When the dust settled, only the wreckage of an assault spaceship was left. It was one of the Dark Star spaceships that had been shot down by the mercenaries, and it had coincidentally landed here. A skeleton was sitting not far away from the landing point. It slowly stood up and walked toward the wreckage of the spaceship. The mutation source that was attached to its neck sensed a strong energy reaction from the wreckage. It was the energy core of the spaceship. The radiation of the Germinal Organization Base ruins had been greatly absorbed by the mutation source, and the spaceship that had fallen was like an airdrop to it. The skeleton crawled into the cabin through the hole in the spaceship, and following its senses, it found the leaking energy core. Countless black tentacles extended out from the mutation source and wrapped around the energy core like a spider around its prey. The air started to distort, and a strong energy flowed into the mutation source through the tentacles. The tentacles were constantly switching between expanding and contracting. The energy core of one of the spaceships contained a large amount of fuel, and as the mutation source consumed it, the fuel rapidly disappeared. The speed at which the mutation source absorbed the fuel increased, and the mutation source began to emit a thumping sound that sounded like a heartbeat. The energy core let out a final humming sound before falling silent. The light gradually dimmed until it disappeared, and the mutation source retracted all of its tentacles. The skeleton froze on the spot. All of a sudden, the mutation source spat out a large amount of black mucus. The mucus was extremely thick, and it had the texture of paint. The mutation source spilled for a long time, and only when the mucus had covered the entire room did this strange behavior slowly stop. The next moment, all of the mucus started to flow as though it had a life of its own. The skeleton was in the center of the room, and all of the mucus flowed toward the skeleton, climbing along its feet. The final puddle of mucus also climbed onto the skeleton. At this moment, the skeleton had undergone a huge change, and it was no longer a lone skeleton. Instead, it had turned into a black human body, and the mucus seemed to have solidified to form flesh and blood. The body looked extremely sturdy, and its facial features slowly appeared. The eyes, nose, mouth, and ears moved around on the face before finally finding a suitable position. If Han Shao was here, he would have realized that this appearance was similar to their leader, just that it was not disfigured. This monster opened its mouth and let out a meaningless cry. It actually had vocal cords. The mutation source had swallowed a large amount of energy, and its growth had increased exponentially. Its main body was no longer passively converting all of the absorbed energy but could control a portion of it to multiply. Thus, a small puddle of the mutation source was able to spit out mucus that filled the room. At the same time, the mutation source shared the senses of countless living beings and understood all kinds of life forms. With the skeleton as the foundation, it formed the structure of a human body. This monster was not a host but a simulated body. Other than being completely black and not having any sexual characteristics, it was no different from a human body. The mutation source was wrapped within the simulated body. The simulated body lowered its head and looked at its body through its own eyes, touching it curiously. It shared the senses of all the infected, but this was a body that it was controlling. This kind of control was completely different, and it could not help but feel a strange feeling, freedom. The original intelligence of the mutation source was controlled by its instincts. Right now, its chaotic thoughts were starting to fade away, and it was gradually becoming clearer. It was like a 2 to 3-year-old child suddenly gaining memories, and the world in front of it had become completely different. Air, hands, body, the simulated body let out a muffled voice, and the memories stored by its countless shared senses surged like a tidal wave. A sense of fatigue quickly overwhelmed it. The simulated body staggered out of the spaceship and left this place. It walked aimlessly in a certain direction, disappearing into the horizon of the wasteland. In another region of Blue Star, the equipment of the Dark Star hidden team had detected that the energy of the mutation source had increased explosively, and all the members were shocked. The working manual had recorded the meaning of this situation. This meant that the mutation source had reached saturation and was about to begin the next stage of evolution. Chapter 529. A few days later. Tsinghua Network, The Volga boss yawned, casually played a card, and asked Toulouse, "Hey, how long are we going to stay on this primitive planet?" At this time, the mercenary group officers were playing cards and chatting in the hall. Hearing this, they all turned to look at Toulouse. "We can only leave this place after we solve the problem of this planet. This is not something I can control." Toulouse shook his head helplessly. Everyone subconsciously turned to look at a military factory outside the window. That was Han Zhao's machinery modification room. At this time, Han Zhao was repairing the captured assault spaceship. The mercenary group had stayed on Blue Star for more than a month. Other than selecting players every day, they basically had nothing else to do. Most of the time, they were extremely bored. From the perspective of the galactic mercenaries, Blue Star's entertainment was naturally very lacking. Other than playing cards, there was no other activity. Many people felt that their bones were about to rust. If there was a reward for this matter, many people could still bear with it. However, this was Black Star's order, and they could only helplessly follow it and hope that this matter would be resolved quickly. After this failed attack, Dark Star did not come to Blue Star again, as if they were afraid of the power of the combination of Black Star and Ghidorah's fleet. However, there was news of Dark Star attacking other Calamity planets from time to time. However, as Ghidorah deployed more fleets to the Calamity planets, Dark Star's attacks often ended in failure. For example, on Blue Star, Ghidorah's battleships were on standby in outer space, and it was about the same for the other Calamity planet. However, the size of Dark Star's fleet had also increased, and they were still pressuring Ghidorah. Ghidorah had to split its forces to protect more than 10 Calamity planets, so its fleet was spread out and its military strength was tight. On the other hand, Dark Star did not have such a disadvantage and had the initiative. The Garten star system was in deep trouble. On the other hand, Blue Star had only been attacked once, and they had even defeated the enemy. Thus, the disaster relief situation was good, and the environment of the 6 nations and the sanctuary was rather stable. Inside the military factory, dang dang dang, some small auxiliary robots climbed up and down the scaffolding, welding the armor of the spaceship. Electric sparks flew everywhere, and the sound of metal knocking could be heard. It was a busy scene. Han Zhao controlled the mechanical hand, transforming it into various tools to repair the damage to the spaceship. This type of large mechanical hand was not only used for combat, but it was also often used to modify large machines. It was like an enlarged hand that could be controlled like an arm. Some time ago, the mercenaries collected the wreckage and brought back enough materials. He then started to repair the captured spaceships and was almost done. He also had some experience in repairing large machines, so it was better than nothing. Check the damage, Han Shao stopped and said. Performing system self-check, Ship damage level 0%, The AI of the assault ship had been replaced by Philip. In the past few days, other than repairing the assault ships, Han Shao had also created some precision machines that enhanced the virtual technology, increasing Philip's computing speed. Rista had also optimized the structure of Philip's algorithms, increasing Philip's efficiency by 2 to 3 times. Under Philip's control, the performance bonuses of the machines were much higher, and the bonuses provided for his virtual intrusion had roughly doubled compared to before. Philip was still a distance away from Rista. Constantly strengthening and nurturing one's own artificial intelligence was the long-term job of a virtual mechanic, and they could obtain very high benefits from it. The last spaceship is also repaired, and it can be used normally. Han Shao nodded with satisfaction. With a snap of his fingers, the various repair machines were automatically retracted. The mercenary group's current fleet was mostly rented travel transport spaceships, and the 9 assault ships had replenished the fleet's firepower. Furthermore, these were all his spoils of war, so his harvest was quite bountiful. After drinking a mouthful of water, Han Shao took out his communicator and browsed through the mercenary group interface. The size of the mercenary group was already hundreds of times larger than before they returned to Blue Star. After this period of operation, more than 100,000 players had been recruited by him, and the number was still increasing every day. It was already fully deserving of being called a large mercenary group. While the current strength of the players was not strong enough, with the growth rate of the players, all of them had potential. When we enter the galaxy, I will be able to provide them with an ocean of mission resources, and they will give me an ocean of wealth in return. With so many members, the status of the Black Star Mercenary will skyrocket once again. At that time, the name of the Floating Dragon Field Team will no longer be an empty title. Thinking about the effect of a mercenary group with hundreds of thousands of members, Han Xiaoxin was filled with anticipation. However, due to the mutation disaster, his mercenary group had to remain in Blue Star for the time being. Now they were only accumulating strength. Only after the mutation disaster was dealt with would it be time for them to enter the galaxy. Han Shao had always been paying attention to the movements of Dark Star. He was waiting for Dark Star to carry out the next step of their plan. That would be the best time to hand over his hand. After leaving the military factory, Han Shao headed to the meeting room. According to the schedule, Ghidorah and the upper echelons of the sanctuary would have a meeting to discuss disaster relief. Such meetings would be held once every few days, and he was already used to it. When he arrived at the meeting room, Bennett, Nagajan, and the others were already waiting there. After Han Shao sat down, the few of them nodded in acknowledgement before starting the discussion. It was all about disaster relief, and Han Shao was not concerned about it, so he did not interrupt. After talking for more than half an hour, they finally stopped talking about this topic. Nagajan changed the topic and said, "Currently, Ghidorah and Darkstar are in a stalemate. The enemy is constantly attacking the Calamity planets, and the War Bureau is constantly sending reinforcements. Both sides are in a tug-of-war." When Han Shao heard this, he said, "That doesn't sound good." Nagajan said helplessly, "We don't know how many fleets Darkstar has, but we have to protect more than a dozen Calamity planets, and we don't have enough manpower. This is Darkstar's plan to force us to split up our forces. Although the situation is now in a stalemate, if Darkstar is willing to send a large force to attack a Calamity planet, we definitely won't be able to stop them. Therefore, the situation is not optimistic, but the enemy did not do so. Then do you have a way to deal with it? Yes. Nagajin nodded. Due to the fact that our forces are scattered and far away, the War Bureau has decided to use the military orbital hyperdrive base station. The deployment will be completed in a few days. Bennett asked curiously, "What's that?" Han Shao thought for a while and said, "You can think of it as a military teleportation portal." The military orbital hyperdrive base station was a strategic weapon in galactic warfare. Within a certain range, it could lock onto 2 or more coordinates through a wormhole generator and form a fast teleportation channel between the coordinates, allowing fleets that were far away from each other to quickly reinforce each other. This device was like a space fortress, and it required a lot of technology. Only high-level gods who knew how to build stable stargates could build it. Ghidorah's military orbital hyperdrive base station was an important military resource purchased from the star cluster gods in the Shattered Star Ring, and it was extremely expensive. To deploy the military orbital hyperdrive base station, anchor points had to be set up at various coordinates, and the base station had to be located at the center of the range formed by these anchor points. With this device, Ghidorah made up for the weakness of having their forces spread across more than a dozen Calamity planet. These guard fleets would be able to protect each other, and no matter which planet Darkstar attacked, reinforcements would be able to arrive within 2 to 3 minutes, reducing the travel time by millions of times. As such, Darkstar's attack would no longer be a threat. The fact that the War Bureau was willing to use this strategic weapon meant that they did not want to be in a passive position. Han Shao raised his brows and said, "This is an expensive strategic weapon. Darkstar will definitely attack your base station." "The enemy will definitely do so." Nagajin was not worried. Since the War Bureau dared to use the base station, they naturally had enough fleets to protect it and even take the initiative. Even if Darkstar's whereabouts were unpredictable, they would definitely attack the base station. This meant that they had enough time to prepare. Han Zhao's eyes flashed and he shook his head. In truth, the people of Ghidorah were not really worried. Although Darkstar's attack had caused some losses to Ghidorah, the Calamity planets were still the ones that suffered the most. The people of Ghidorah still thought that they could control the situation. However, he knew that Darkstar was not so easy to deal with. Now that the base station is out, the next step of Darkstar's plan should be out soon, Han Shao thought to himself. Nagajin still wanted to say something, but at this moment, a commotion could be heard from afar. The next moment, the commotion spread rapidly from afar to near. Like a tsunami, it filled the entire shelter and was everywhere. Boom, boom, boom. The ground rumbled, and even the windows trembled from the commotion. Bennett suddenly stood up with a look of shock. "What's going on?" Bennett hurriedly turned on the screen in the conference room and pulled out the surveillance footage of the various locations in the sanctuary. The originally orderly sanctuary had turned into a mess, and the long-awaited mutation disaster had appeared once again. Even the refugees who had been injected with the suppressant had acted up. The situation outside the sanctuary was even worse, and even the guards of the sanctuary had acted up. Even the people who were supposed to maintain order were gone, and the order that had been established with much difficulty collapsed. The commotion of tens of millions of people was like a tsunami. Squeezing, roaring, tearing, fighting. Apart from the chaotic battle, there were even more people who were running away from the sanctuary. It was as though the sanctuary had brought them great fear, and they only wanted to escape. The people who were running away formed a long line and ran in all directions. The dense crowd outside the sanctuary quickly spread out, and some people fell to the ground and were instantly drowned by the crowd that was chasing after them. The players were dumbfounded, and very quickly, someone realized that the progress of the mutation disaster had plummeted. The sudden chaos shocked both Bennett and Nagajin. Han Zhao's expression changed slightly, and he stood up. Chapter 530. The first stage of the mutation disaster was a chaotic global uprising, which represented the first time the mutation source had gained control over the world. The first manifestation of the second stage was the outbreak of all the infected. Compared to the first stage, the mutation source's influence was no longer limited to ordinary people. Some of the elite soldiers and supers, who were slightly weaker, had also become targets of its control. The most obvious characteristic of this stage was that the mutation source was no longer random and had a goal in mind. The purpose of the infected was the manifestation of the consciousness of the mutation source. Compared to the chaos of the first stage, the large number of refugees escaping was shockingly uniform, and they were all under the control of the mutation source. The target of the mutation source is traceable, and it probably did not want the infected people to gather together. Furthermore, it realized that someone was helping the infected people escape from its control. Thus, it wanted the infected people to be as far away from the gathering place as possible. To it, every infected person is a censor. Han Xiao frowned. Something similar had happened in his previous life. While there was no official explanation, the players had all sorts of discussions and guesses, and he could roughly guess the thoughts of the mutation source. The only problem was that the outbreak of the second stage was much earlier than the storyline in his previous life. It might be random, but it might also be a butterfly effect. Han Xiao sighed. Because of him, many things had developed differently from the storyline in his previous life. This was not the first time he had encountered such a situation, and he quickly regained his composure after a slight shock. It was impossible for him to panic, and he was extremely stable. While it was unexpected, it was not enough to make him flustered. Walking out of the conference room, the commotion outside was getting bigger and bigger. Han Xiao immediately mobilized all the mercenaries, including the players. The most important thing now was to control all the infected. With the mutation disaster entering the second stage, the strength of the mutation source had increased. Originally, a single dose of suppressant would be effective, but now it required at least 3 doses. The Sanctuary and God Aura also hurriedly took action, and the players triggered many missions in an instant. Everyone's main storyline mission progress was plummeting, and they did not dare delay. The scale of the refugees was huge, and the Sanctuary did not have much manpower to mobilize. Including the players, there were only about 1 million of them. However, most of them were supers, and while it was troublesome for them to subdue ordinary people, it was not difficult. The refugees at the outermost layer fled in all directions, and it was like a circle that was constantly expanding. The spaceships on standby quickly activated and flew out, shooting out white shockwaves at the refugees below. Buzz, buzz, the ring-shaped shockwave swept through the crowd, and the refugees fell down like wheat being cut. All of them were knocked unconscious. Since he knew that the mutation disaster would erupt on a large scale, Han Xiao had already made preparations to deal with it. He had equipped all the spaceships with AoE shock cannons, but the power was extremely weak. Against super-grade supers, it might not even be able to stun them for half a second. It could only act cute in battle, but it was perfect for dealing with ordinary people. It was precisely because he already had a plan that Han Xiao did not care how many refugees the shelter took in. Even if they all fell ill at the same time, he could greatly reduce the losses. It was more convenient to gather them together. A few spaceships continuously knocked out the refugees from the inside out, cooperating with the players to quickly clean up the inside of the shelter. Then, they dealt with the refugees outside. The refugees at the outermost area ran the furthest, but there was no way to knock them out from the outermost area, because those who were knocked out would be trampled to death by the crowd behind them. Kakae's mechanical hand opened up and carried Han Xiao to the top of the city wall. He looked down at the commotion outside and saw a sea of people surging into the distance like waves. It was a spectacular sight. He took out his communicator and connected to the other spaceships of the Six Nations. The scene was almost the same. As expected, not only the sanctuary, the Six Nations were also facing the same situation. The speed of the mutation disaster has increased, which means that the pressure on the relief efforts has increased. Even if Dark Star did not attack, the situation of Blue Star would not be optimistic. It should be the first of all the Calamity planets to reach the second stage of the mutation source. However, with my help, the Blue Star Sanctuary and the Six Nations have already made preparations to deal with it. The situation is much better than before. Han Xiaoxin calculated in his mind. If the mutation source did not have a clear consciousness in the past and was mainly chaotic, from the second stage onwards, it would be facing an opponent with a target and would be much harder to deal with. Furthermore, the moment it entered the second stage, the mutation source would also grow rapidly. Thankfully, it will not take too long. It should be around this period of time. At that time, I will be able to hand over the mutation source in my hands. As long as Ghidorah can quickly develop an antidote and a weapon to deal with the mutation source, the mutation disaster will be resolved. Han Zhao's eyes sparkled. The sun fell below the horizon, and the red clouds of the evening covered the sky. The commotion in the sanctuary gradually calmed down, and after a few hours, they had finally subdued most of the refugees. Those who had escaped the furthest had run dozens of kilometers away. Thankfully, the sanctuary was located in the Gorst wastelands, and there was no cover. Thus, they could not escape the search of the spaceship. In a radius of dozens of kilometers, there were many refugees lying on the ground. It was a spectacular sight. Some of the players were following the mission instructions of the sanctuary and looking for some sanctuary guards to inject them with 3 times the amount of suppressors to increase their manpower. The others were cleaning up the mess and moving the refugees back. "How are the losses?" On the city wall, Bennett asked his deputy with a grave expression. His deputy shook his head, indicating that they had not calculated the losses yet. The losses in the sanctuary are the smallest. The Six Nations are still trying their best to suppress the commotion, but they should be done soon, Han Xiao said casually. At least it is not the worst situation. Bennett heaved a sigh of relief. Han Xiao shook his head and said, "The mutation disaster is growing, and we will face an even more tense situation. Not to mention the fact that the suppressors are becoming more and more urgent. Just the fact that the mutation source is consciously controlling the infected is the greatest danger. We have forcefully detained so many of its senses, and it is very likely that it will control the beast hordes to attack the sanctuary or the Six Nations. It might even cause the infected to develop a desire for destruction and attack our facilities from the inside." Hearing that, Bennett's expression became even more solemn. He was not someone who would belittle himself, but he was extremely clear that with such a serious situation, if not for Han Xiao, it would be impossible for the Blue Star civilization to stop this disaster. "What do you plan to do?" "Nothing." Han Xiao raised his brows and said, "The mercenaries under me are extremely bored, and the beast hordes are not a problem. As for the other problems, let's wait and see. As for your side, you have to quickly adapt to the new situation." "I understand." Bennett nodded his head. The mutation source could be hiding underground or in the ocean, and the radar database did not record its wavelength. It was difficult to locate it, and it was no different from finding a needle in a haystack. Furthermore, due to the unique characteristics of the mutation source, it was extremely difficult to deal with without an antidote. It absorbed energy, and the majority of attacks could be turned into nourishment for its growth. Ordinary attacks would not be able to harm it, and it could rapidly split apart, making it extremely difficult to capture. At the moment, Han Xiao did not wish to deal with the mutation source personally. It was too disgusting, and it did not benefit him at all. Apart from giving Ghidorah a headache and allowing him to obtain benefits, there was another reason. The mutation disaster was a temporary protective talisman. If the mutation disaster on the blue star side was dealt with by him, he was not sure what Darkstar would do. Perhaps there would be no need to hold back against the non-calamity planets, and the enemy would directly come to destroy the blue star. He was not afraid, and he could leave at any time. However, there was no way for him to bring the blue star along with him. Only the 3 great universal civilizations or beyond grade A experts with special abilities had such an ability. Retracting his thoughts, Han Shao gathered all the officers of the mercenary group. Sweeping his gaze across everyone, he said, "According to my calculations, there will be a large-scale beast hordes in the next few days. Bring some men to patrol the vicinity. The moment you discover any beast hordes, eliminate them. Do not let the beast hordes get close to the sanctuary." Everyone had different expressions on their faces. After idling for so many days, they finally had something to do. The happiest person was naturally Harmon. Carrying his huge axe, he said, "Harmon likes to hunt." Han Shao thought for a moment and said, "Right, bring the new Inhumans out to train as well. Don't let them get bored in the sanctuary." The majority of the players had been staying in the sanctuary. While it was not compulsory, the repeated disaster relief missions would definitely be a little boring. Apart from the daily selection, there were not many opportunities for them to fight. As for the players who had already joined the Black Star Mercenary, they would naturally not be able to participate in the selection and would not have the opportunity to fight. They would definitely be depressed, and their gaming experience would be terrible. In the second stage of the mutation disaster, the beast hordes would be even more frequent. It was a good opportunity for the mercenary group to go out and train. At the same time, it was also a good opportunity for the mercenary group that had expanded by a few hundred times. Furthermore, if they did not fight monsters, the players would not be in urgent need of equipment. Somewhere in the blue star, a black figure sat cross-legged in a cave, motionless like a statue. After a long time, the pure white eyes moved slightly. "Imprisoning my senses, hateful," the simulation mumbled to itself. The simulation mumbled to itself, its voice intermittent. It had only obtained its current body a few days ago, so it was still not used to speaking. After obtaining its own body, the mutation source felt a sense of freedom. While it could share the senses of the infected, and even control their movements to a certain extent, it could only control the simulated body. Just a moment ago, the mutation source had completed its evolution. While it was not clear to itself, it only felt that its senses had become clearer. Every infected person was a sense in the eyes of the mutation source, and they were like the limbs of an ordinary person. They were viewed as a part of its body, and when it was unable to move, it had used these senses to understand the world. Right now, it could clearly feel that many of its senses were restricted to a few locations. Just a moment ago, it had wanted to command these senses to spread out and not gather together. However, through the senses of the infected, it had seen the refugees being suppressed by Han Shao and the others. As such, it understood the situation. These people are the enemy, and they are harming my senses. In the mind of the mutation source, there were no moral standards or common sense. It only had the instincts of a living being, and it could even be said to be very simple. In its eyes, someone suppressing the refugees was equivalent to controlling its senses. It was like a person whose 5 limbs were tightly gripped by someone else, and these senses were forcefully gathered together. It was as though someone wanted it to be unable to move and sense the world. Furthermore, some of its senses had been injected with some sort of liquid, causing it to lose its senses toward the infected. It was equivalent to blinding its eyes and deafening its ears. As such, it was extremely unhappy. Chapter 531. The Colton star cluster contained many star systems, and Ghidorah occupied the Garton star system. From the star map, The Garten star system was located to the southwest of the Colton star cluster and was connected to 3 other star systems. There was the Fae star system controlled by Holy Stone and Black Crow, the Skywalker star system controlled by Hutming, and the Hyde star system that was not controlled by any powerful star system. Tsinghua Book Network. The Hyde star system was a land of contention, and there had never been any high-level star system level Ming there. Its level of development was far lower than the regions controlled by the star system level Ming, and it was rich in resources. Be it mineral planets or energy planets, they could be mined for tens of millions of years. The geographical location of Hyde was rather unique, and it was connected to the territories of 6 high-level stars. In the eyes of these high-level stars, Hyde was undoubtedly a piece of juicy meat. Be it for the sake of resources or strategic value, this region was a place that had to be fought over. The 6 high-level stars expanded one after another, and each of them occupied a portion of Hyde. Hyde was not under the jurisdiction of any star system level Ming, and the 6 star system level Ming treated the regions that they had already occupied as new territories. However, due to the disputes over the ownership of the territories, the 6 star system level Ming coveted one another, resulting in constant conflicts. The Hyde star system level Ming had always been the main diplomatic point of the 6 star system level Ming, and none of them were willing to give in. Of the 6 star system level Ming that had divided Hyde, there were Ghidorah and Hutming. As their territories were connected to each other, the conflicts were even more intense. While the mutation disaster in the Garten star system was causing a commotion, Hutming's Skywalker star system welcomed a special guest. On a certain desolate and uninhabited planet, a small spaceship was parked on a black plain. The door of the spaceship opened, and the leader of Dark Star squatted on the ground, using his finger to casually draw on the ground, waiting for the person that he had contacted. Shio. Soon, a loud noise came from the sky, and a spaceship with the Hut logo slowly landed not far away. A Hut in a high-level uniform walked down the stairs, followed by dozens of guards. He seemed to be a very important person. The leader of Dark Star raised his head and looked up. There were dozens of bright spots floating in the dark sky, and they were all the guards of the person that had come, waiting for orders outside the atmosphere. The Hut in front of him was a high-ranking official. He was the emissary sent to communicate with him. The leader of Dark Star had secretly contacted Hut and facilitated this meeting. Official Hut waved his hand and signaled for the guards to retreat. He walked forward alone and sized up the Dark Star leader. "You have guts, daring to step into the Skywalker star system with only a few people. Are you not afraid that we will capture you and send you to Ghidorah?" Dark Star's leader was fearless. "I came here alone to show my sincerity. Furthermore, you won't do anything to me. Dark Star's existence can restrict Ghidorah. An enemy's enemy is a friend. All right, I know that Dark Star's reputation is terrible, and Hurt is unwilling to have anything to do with us. However, no one will go against benefit. Confident people will always die because of their own self-confidence." The official from Hut was expressionless. "Since you are willing to meet me, it means that you are interested in what I have to say. Then, I will make it short. The commotion caused by us has affected Ghidorah's energy, and now is the best time to encroach on Ghidorah's territory in Hyde. As long as it does not escalate into an all-out war between the two supers, the peace treaty can go to hell. You want to use us to pressure Ghidorah and help you indirectly? Humph, you think too highly of your conditions. Starting a war with Ghidorah for that bit of territory is too risky. The star cluster supers in the shattered star ring will not allow us to break the rules. If we attract the attention of the 3 supers, it will be even worse. The era of war is long over, and it is not so easy now," the official from Hut said coldly. "Supers who do not maintain their ambitions have no future." The Dark Star leader said coldly, "The structure of the galaxy has been set long ago. If you do not think of a way to move forward, you will forever be a plaything at the top of the food chain. Everyone has hidden their fangs, but no one has truly accepted their fate. The path forward will only get more and more crowded, and competition is unavoidable. However, the current order ensures that the losers will not lose everything. Every minute, there are hundreds and thousands of places in the entire universe where wars break out. You know better than I do that war to a certain extent is tacitly allowed. Only idiots would think that a single peace treaty would be able to erase all dispute. Everyone chooses to abide by this rule. Other than submitting to the military might of the three great Ming, this rule is also to ensure the safety of the losers. As long as the Ming's strength reaches the standard to enter the game, they will not be exterminated, which is beneficial to everyone. The official from Hut did not say anything. This was indeed a hidden consensus. As long as intelligent species did not go extinct, wars would never disappear. The only thing that changed was the way they fought. Life and thought had infinite possibilities. Since it was infinite, it meant that the complete peace where all species understood each other would never come. The peace treaty, created by the three supers, covered all supers on paper, but when it was actually implemented, there would naturally be more hidden rules. Only supers who had reached the star system level would be able to obtain this exemption from death. The universe was vast, and there were many species dying and being born every minute. Only supers who had a certain level of strength or status would have the right to be valued. Being at the star system level was the prerequisite for entering the game. Hut and Ghidorah were both at this level. There were constant conflicts, but they had a tacit understanding of each other and controlled the conflicts to a certain extent. They knew that they could not do anything to each other, so they placed more importance on fighting for benefit. This was like knowing that there was a competitor and that they could not kill him, so they could only snatch the benefits. The official from Hut was actually interested in the suggestion of the Dark Star leader. After a moment of silence, the official from Hut slowly opened his mouth and asked a question that made the Dark Star leader's expression change. The goal of Dark Star is to overthrow the rule of the purebloods and establish a new Ghidorah. However, your destruction of Ghidorah has already exceeded the bottom line, and you have been classified as a terrorist organization. Do you think you still have any chance of becoming the ruler? The only way for you is a coup d'état. However, let's not talk about the slim chance of success. As long as there is a Dark Star leader, the Star Cluster Supers will immediately punish you. Do you really think that ruling over Ghidorah can wash away your past crimes? No, unless you can stand shoulder to shoulder with the Star Cluster Supers overnight, there will be a day of reckoning. I am really fine. What are you, Dark Star, thinking? The Dark Star leader lowered his eyes and said with a strange tone, "This has nothing to do with you. According to the prosperity of the planet, the planets controlled by Ghidorah could be categorized into different grades. The mother planet and a few other planets were classified as first-tier planets, and below that were first-tier planet. Planet Golden Gate, which was close to Ubarely Hub, was an example. The second-tier planets, which were slightly worse, were third-tier planet. Garten Star System, a certain second-tier colonial planet of Ghidorah. An old-looking spaceship landed, and it was extremely inconspicuous in the bustling docks. Ashes, who was wearing a disguise, walked down from the spaceship and looked at the crowd and the guards not far away. The crowd flowed endlessly, and it was a scene of prosperity. A cold smile appeared on his face, and he slowly raised his hand to the same height as his eyes. He then snapped his fingers. "Turn into dust." His voice was transmitted to the fleet that was on standby far away from the colonial planet through a miniature communicator. There were a total of 3 Dark Star motherships that were ready to make a move. Chapter 532. Blue Star. A few days after the second stage of the mutation disaster, the number of beasts near the sanctuary had increased significantly. In order to prevent a beast horde from forming, Herluz and the rest of the mercenaries were finally put to good use. They led the players who had joined the mercenary group to exterminate the beasts and set up various defensive positions in the wasteland. The players were the main force in exterminating the beasts, and the defensive positions quickly became places for the players to form teams to farm beasts, recruit members, and sell equipment. Most beasts were easier to control than humans, and according to Han Zhao's understanding of the mutation source, after entering the second stage, it would consciously control the beasts to attack places like the sanctuary, causing the attacks to become more frequent. This could be some sort of counterattack by the mutation source, but Han Zhao was not too bothered by it. The mutation disaster was only a huge threat to Blue Star, and his level had long surpassed the upper limit of version 20. Thus, the threat of the mutation disaster to Han Zhao was limited. Han Zhao did not treat the mutation source as an important opponent. After all, he had a trump card that could deal with it. His main goal was to make use of this opportunity to complete his plan of recruiting players. Dealing with the mutation disaster and dealing with Darkstar were both less important. However, from the perspective of the players, the mutation disaster was the first main storyline mission since the start of version 20, and it was extremely challenging. For the sake of completing the main storyline mission, the players did not lack missions in the Sanctuary, Black Star Mercenary, and Godora, and there were opportunities everywhere. During version 10, the players already had a basic understanding of Blue Star, and during the mutation disaster that swept across the world, everyone worked together to complete the mission. There was a strange sense of group effort, and most of the time there was competition between the players. However, this time they were required to work as one, and it was a very strange feeling. Han Zhao did not need to personally deal with the disaster, but the players were currently on the front lines of disaster relief. They would encounter all sorts of side missions and characters, and they were extremely busy. The various actions of Black Star and Godora were part of the storyline in the eyes of the players. At this time, the Blue Star players were still unable to personally participate in the matters of Han Zhao's level. Other than when he was recruiting players, Han Zhao did not pay much attention to the overall situation of the players. He understood the players. No matter what the situation was, the players would always find space to express themselves and have fun. They were very subjective and did not need him to worry at all. A few days later, just as Nagajin had revealed, Godora had set up a military orbital transition station. The temporary Stargate was connected to all the Calamity Planet. As long as Darkstar dared to appear, what awaited them was a thunderous strike. The War Bureau was full of ambition. However, Darkstar ceased its attacks and stopped attacking. The Garten star system seemed to have calmed down, but this was just an illusion. Not long after, a new piece of news shocked the entire galaxy. Ghodora's colony planet, Long Arc, was attacked by a large Darkstar fleet. The enemy had 3 Darkstar motherships as the core, and there were more than 4,000 battleships. Ghodora's fleet fought an intense battle with the enemy and suffered heavy losses. Long Arc was bombarded by cannon fire, and more than 40 cities were turned into ruins. The remaining cities were severely damaged, and the death toll is estimated to be more than 300 million. According to reports, the attack started when a Darkstar member used a destructive Esper ability on the surface of Long Arc. This person has the ability to turn a human body into dust, and tens of millions of people died under his ability. The Ghodora civilization responded to this attack by sending 3 waves of reinforcements. In the end, thousands of enemy battleships and a Darkstar mothership were wiped out, and the Darkstar fleet was repelled. Ghodora's colony planets have been attacked many times in history, but this is the only time that a colony planet was almost wiped out. Darkstar's actions this time are viewed as extremely vile terrorist activities. This is the worst incident in the Garten star system in the past 10 years, and we have reason to believe that this is the signal that Darkstar is about to start a war again. According to the investigation, the origin of this incident should be a disaster that happened on more than 10 civilized planets at the same time. Currently, we do not know what Ghidorah's response is. After reading the news, Han Shao let out a sigh of relief, and his eyes flashed. We have finally reached this stage. Dark Star's attack on the colonies caused more harm to Ghidorah than attacking the Calamity Planet. Furthermore, they were serious this time, and 3 Dark Star motherships were dispatched at the same time. In the information exposed by the internal players of Dark Star in his previous life, Dark Star did not have more than 15 motherships at their peak. Furthermore, that bastard Ashes had run to the surface and attacked from both inside and outside. It had to be said that Ashes's Esper ability was extremely powerful against ordinary people. With just a thought, he could decompose all carbon-based life forms within the range of his Esper ability. He was the killing tool in the eyes of Dark Star, and this was the first time Ashes had publicly displayed his power to the entire star system. Dark Star was not like Ghidorah, who had hundreds of military factories. Every single mothership that they lost was a huge blow to their foundation, and they had to spend a large amount of money to replenish it. Losing a mothership during the attack on Long Arc was not a small loss. However, Han Shao knew that Dark Star had already achieved the desired outcome. The Long Arc tragedy shook the entire Ghidorah civilization. After the incident, there was a theory that Dark Star had attacked the Calamity planets to tie down Ghidorah's forces and then take advantage of the situation. Dark Star's real goal was to attack the colonies. As a result, Ghidorah's citizens on the other colonial planets felt insecure, and the support for rescuing the Calamity planets fell to rock bottom overnight. Countless people strongly requested Ghidorah to recall the forces that were protecting the Calamity planets and use them to protect them. As it concerned their own safety, almost all Ghidorah's citizens accepted this explanation, and their sympathy for the Calamity planets was naturally thrown to the back of their minds. In reality, the Long Arc tragedy had little to do with the disaster relief forces. The main reason for the failure was Dark Star's overwhelming force. They had taken out 3 Dark Star motherships at once, and the defense forces of a second-tier colonial planet naturally could not defend against them. The military orbital transit station was not connected to the colonial planets, and it would take a lot of time to redeploy it. Although Ghidorah was powerful, its forces were scattered across hundreds of colonial planets, and it was impossible for every planet to have a strong defense force. If Dark Star went all out, it could still forcefully take down a few colonial planets. If not, Ghidorah would not have viewed it as a great enemy. This time, Dark Star had also lost a mothership fleet. However, most people did not care about the losses of Dark Star. They only cared about the consequences of Dark Star and Ghidorah's losses. Ghidorah's citizens were unable to maintain their rational judgment, and people who were panicking were the easiest to lead. Furthermore, Dark Star was behind this incident to incite public opinion. Not only did this cause panic, but on the other hand, the conflict between the purebloods and the hybrids was once again stirred up. Many people who lived in Long Arc had relatives or friends who had died unnatural deaths, and Dark Star was the instigator. Dark Star had always used the name of the hybrids as an excuse. Under such circumstances, the hybrids living in Ghidorah's colonies naturally became a substitute for venting their hatred and anger. The conflict between the people was due to the long-standing discrimination against the hybrids, and it was almost a tradition. Ghidorah's government could not forcefully change it. The Hutt civilization had always been paying attention to Ghidorah, and when they realized that Ghidorah was troubled by internal problems, the Hutts were willing to play the role of external problems. The Hutt fleet stationed in the Hyde star system started to move, and they madly probed the borders of Ghidorah's territory, constantly putting pressure on them. The continuous attacks made Ghidorah unable to breathe. Dark Star's shadow was behind all of these incidents, and their actions were only the beginning. The Long Arc massacre was the fuse that triggered the entire situation. However, Han Shao was not prepared to allow Darkstar's plan to continue. Ghidorah is probably as disgusted as eating sh*t right now. Han Shao shook his head. He did not like Ghidorah, but he would not rejoice in their misfortune. After all, Darkstar was their common enemy. The mutation disaster is one of the key conflicts, and Ghidorah will realize that time is of the essence. The best solution is to get rid of the mutation disaster as soon as possible. This way, the disaster relief team will be able to be freed up, and the internal conflicts will be resolved. I happen to have a copy of the mutation source in my hands, and as long as I provide it to Ghidorah, they will be able to create the antidote very quickly, and the mutation disaster will be resolved. As long as the situation was resolved, Ghidorah would be able to relax and focus on dealing with Darkstar. The more urgent Ghidorah's needs were, the more benefits he would be able to obtain from the mutation source. Now is the time. Although Ghidorah is willing to pay a higher price if this drags on, there is no need to wait for Darkstar to obtain a huge result before making a move. As long as Ghidorah realizes the importance of time, they will naturally understand the consequences of not being able to stop Darkstar. Han Shao calmed himself down and sent a contact request to Nagajin. However, even after waiting for a long time, the other party did not pick up. This was not usually the case. After being stunned for a moment, Han Shao decided to go to Ghidorah's camp and look for Nagajin. However, he was stopped by Nagajin's adjutant. Black Star, Officer Nagajin instructed me not to let anyone disturb him unless there is something important. Please return. What's wrong with him? Officer is currently in a meeting with the upper echelons and has no time to meet you, the adjutant said solemnly. In the past, Nagajin would not reject him. Han Shao thought about it and immediately understood. Ghidorah was facing internal and external problems, and Nagajin was a high-ranking official. He would naturally be busy, and in his eyes, Han Shao did not seem that important. Han Shao stroked his chin and suddenly thought of something. He did not insist on meeting Nagajin and left Ghidorah's camp. He suddenly realized that even if he wanted to hand over the mutation source, he could not make it seem too timely. Otherwise, it would be thought that he had been carrying the mutation source all along. He had to put on an act. Since the excuse is that the mutation source came from Floating Dragon Island, I might as well make a trip back and put on an act. Han Shao reminded his officers and left Blue Star alone in the Blacklight stealth. 2 hours later, Nagajin ended the meeting and found out that Han Shao had come to find him. Black Star did not find me and left in a spaceship? Nagajin frowned and shook his head. Black Star did not continue to contact him, and it was probably nothing important. He did not want to waste time on such a small matter. The various departments of Ghidorah were in a terrible state because of the Long Arc incident, and the upper echelons might transfer him away from Blue Star. Nagajin was also very busy, and he did not have the time to bother about Han Shao at such a time. The plan is slowly unfolding, and we will definitely be able to reduce Ghidorah's strength greatly this time. In the headquarters of Darkstar, Deputy Leader Degulish was speaking in a meeting with a smug tone. We have caused quite a bit of trouble for Ghidorah, and the public opinion in the country is asking them to withdraw their disaster relief forces. Naturally, it is impossible for them to do so. Since the disaster relief has already begun, if they give up halfway, Ghidorah's position and reputation in the galaxy will be shaken. However, if they continue to persist, the internal conflict will only become more intense. Even if they give up, we will no longer hold back and easily destroy these calamity planet. Not only will we be able to get rid of the organizations that rely on Ghidorah, but we will also create misunderstandings that Ghidorah gave up on the calamity planets, which led to their destruction. These are just some simple examples. In any case, no matter what Ghidorah chooses, they will always be the loser, and we will hold the initiative. Degulish sneered and said, "The mutation disaster, the Hutt civilization, and the internal conflict will all affect Ghodora's energy. We have plenty of time to carry out our follow-up plan, and the mutation disaster is the root of it. The calamity planets will hold back a large portion of Ghodora's mobile forces, and the longer this drags on, the more the situation will ferment. If this can continue for 1 to 2 years, It is hard to say exactly how long it will take, but with Ghodora's research capabilities, it is impossible for them to solve the mutation disaster in a short period of time. They will not be able to research anything." Chapter 533. After leaving Blue Star, Han Shao asked Will Sander about the current location of Floating Dragon Island. During this time, Floating Dragon Island had drifted to the Rain Star system. She had piloted the Blacklight stealth alone, and the main reason for this trip was to put on an act. Before he left, he had wanted to inform Nagakin, but he had not seen the other party, and Nagakin had not taken the initiative to ask about this matter. After pondering for a while, Han Shao decided not to reveal the matter. As such, he did not contact Nagakin from afar for the time being, and he had the time to think about what conditions he should raise with Ghodora. Furthermore, he also wanted to see for himself the impact Darkstar had on the Garten star system. In the storyline of his previous life, he was also a player on the surface, and he only learned about the specific process after the incident. He did not personally experience the changes in the galactic environment. Now that he had the chance to see it with his own eyes, he naturally wanted to open his eyes wide and see it clearly. Han Technician was still very curious about the unknown storyline. The Black Star mercenary had taken on a few missions in the Rain Star system before, so Han Shao was familiar with the route. The itinerary was very simple. He first went to Ubarely Hub to replenish his fuel, then quickly jumped to the Rain Star system through the Stargate. After that, he went to Floating Dragon Island directly. With the speed of the Blacklight stealth, the round trip would take less than half a month. Blue Star did not need him to be there for the time being. After all, Ghodora's military orbital hyperdrive base station was not for decoration. If Darkstar wanted to attack, it would only attack the other colonial planets of Ghodora. The matters of the mercenary group were thrown to Herluz. Herluz was the officer who joined the mercenary group the earliest, and he was also the captain of the Sunil division. When Han Shao was in seclusion building machinery or slacking off, Herluz had always been in charge of the mercenary group's affairs. He was conscientious and was a competent assistant. Han Shao had always adhered to the principle of, if there's anything, the secretary will do it. The Blacklight stealth jumped through the Stargate of Star Zone 9 at high speed and flew out from one of the many Stargates around Ubarely Hub. Without any passengers in the way, he had a great time driving the ship. In the cockpit, Han Shao glanced at the 3D star map. Right, planet Golden Gate is nearby. Let's make a trip there and check on the condition of base number 1. It won't take long anyway. The spaceship turned around and arrived at planet Golden Gate not long after. Through the window, they could see that the current situation on planet Golden Gate was very different from before. A large number of Ghodora fleets were surrounding planet Golden Gate, and their security was extremely tight. Han Shao raised his eyebrows and thought to himself, "That's right, Darkstar's attack on Long Arc Constellation has caused a huge impact, causing Ghodora to feel threatened. All of the colonial planet's fleets are patrolling and defending around the clock. It can be said that they are in a state of panic. Planet Golden Gate's Freedom Pier was also sealed off by the military, and one had to undergo a strict identity check before landing. This was the threat posed by Ashes. The strength that he had displayed made Ghodora extremely cautious, and they did not dare to allow Darkstar's people to slip onto the surface. There was a long queue of spaceships entering and leaving the planet. Han Zhao's identity was successfully checked, but he did not receive any special treatment at this time. He had to queue for a period of time before landing at the pier. Walking on the streets, Han Xiao realized that the atmosphere of the city was completely different. In the past, it was bustling with noise and liveliness, but now there were not many people on the streets, and the atmosphere was extremely tense. Even if there were passers-by, they were all silent and seemed to have a lot on their minds. The most common people on the streets were Ghidorah's patrolling soldiers. They had serious expressions on their faces, and their footsteps were uniform. Han Xiao really wanted to go up and trip them. The changes on planet Golden Gate were due to the terror caused by Darkstar. Although another colonial planet had been attacked, the people from other planets did not know if they would be the next target. Everyone felt that it was very dangerous to stay on a colonial planet. Thus, they decided to take intergalactic travel groups and wander around the universe to avoid the limelight. However, due to the conflict between Ghidorah and Darkstar, the security of the Garten star system had deteriorated rapidly, and the risk of traveling was much greater than before. Many wanderers and space pirates felt that this was an opportunity and felt that Ghidorah did not have the energy to deal with them. Thus, they all came to the Garten star system. Now, there was a large number of villains running amok in the Garten star system. Many Ghidorah people who had escaped were robbed or kidnapped, and this caused the security of Ghidorah to be in a terrible situation. Over the past few days, Han Xiao had received thousands of employment offers from the Mercenary Alliance. They were all about galactic pirates wreaking havoc in the various star zones of the Garten star system. It could be seen that the situation was extremely bad, and it had become a carnival for galactic pirates. Darkstar's influence could be said to be a chain reaction. Darkstar did not join forces with these galactic pirates. Galactic pirates and wanderers were villains who took advantage of loopholes. Now that Darkstar had exposed a loophole in Ghidorah, there would naturally be people who would take advantage of the situation. Han Xiao could also understand this situation. After all, Ghidorah was now in shambles, and the galactic pirates naturally felt that it would be a waste not to come. The situation is really bad. Han Xiao shook his head and thought to himself. When he returned to Black Star Base No. 1, everything was normal. He checked the progress of the military factory's assembly line. Although he was in Blue Star, the assembly line had never stopped working. The program was controlled by Philip, and he could remotely control the assembly line while he was in Blue Star. The machinery and equipment created by the assembly line were piled up into a small mountain in the warehouse. Han Xiao counted the quantity, and it was enough to sell to 200,000 to 300,000 players. These were the goods that he had hoarded, and he was only waiting to guide the players into space. At that time, the only problem was that he might run out of stock. After adding a new batch of materials to the assembly line to maintain the production, Han Xiao did not stay any longer. He left planet Golden Gate and headed to Uberly Hub. The Blacklight Stealth entered the dock of the hub and slowly docked in the boathouse. He needed to replenish a batch of fuel, and he had to bring a portion back to Blue Star to replenish the fuel for the other spaceship. After he was done with his purchases, he could set off. Uberly Hub was still bustling with activity, as though it was not affected by Darkstar at all. Han Xiao walked to the main hall of the hub and walked out of the entrance. After determining the direction, he walked toward the store area. At the same time, a few people in the distance recognized Han Xiao. These people were wearing simple combat suits, which were very common in Uberly Hub. Thus, they did not attract much attention. These people were in a group, and they stared at Han Xiao's back as he walked away. They exchanged glances and whispered to each other. "Is that Black Star?" "That's right, it's him." "Hee, who would have thought that we would actually find such a big fish when we were just here to replenish our supplies?" quickly informed the boss. In a bar in the main hall of the hub, this was a bar that was not very high class and was located in a rather remote location. The group of people who had discovered Han Xiao earlier hurried over. They looked around and quickly came to a seat in the corner of the bar. A burly human was sitting there in a heavy combat suit. He was drinking hard liquor, and the liquor flowed down from the corner of his mouth, wetting his beard that was like a lion's mane. "Boss Bifuli, we've discovered an enemy." Bifuli, who was called the boss, put down his glass heavily, and the liquor splashed out along the rim of the glass. His upper body leaned forward, and a rough face appeared in the dim light of the bar. According to the aesthetics of normal people in the universe, this face was worthy of the title of unrestrained. His eyes did not have any white, and they were completely red like flowing flames. His eyeballs were white, and he looked very ferocious, like someone with red-eye cataracts. Red Flame Eyes Bifuli, a ferocious galactic pirate active in the Fawn star system. He was a Grade B super and belonged to the infamous galactic pirate organization, the Purple Snake Galactic Pirate Gang. The Purple Snake Galactic Pirate Gang had dozens of plundering spaceships, and their captain was a Calamity Grade super. The Black Raven civilization had put a bounty of 2,800,000 anas on him. Han Shao had once been stuck on the promotion mission of killing a Grade super, and the captain of the Purple Snake Galactic Pirate Gang was one of the targets he had considered. Later on, he had drawn a mission completion card, so he did not take the risk. More than 2 years ago, Han Shao had brought Mad Blade and the other players to do missions, and they had once killed an officer of the Purple Snake Galactic Pirate Gang. At that time, they had formed a grudge. As a mercenary, it was inevitable to have enemies, and Han Shao had long been used to it. Bifuli was an officer of the Purple Snake Galactic Pirate Gang. He led a team and came to the Garten star system to plunder while Ghidorah was facing both external and internal problems. At this time, the team he led was hiding their identities and resting in Uberly Hub. In the past, they had mainly been active in the Fawn star system, so it was easy to disguise themselves in the Garten star system. Enemy? Who? It's Black Star. So, it's him. Bifuli laughed with a sinister expression. A few years ago, he killed Motto's team in the Fawn star system. Although I don't like Motto, this debt is something that the captain has always remembered. Boss, Black Star is only one person. Should we make a move on him? A galactic pirate asked softly with a murderous look in his eyes. Bifuli heard this and laughed boorishly. Ha ha! Do you think that Black Star is so easy to kill? Are you courting death? As he spoke, Bifuli's face suddenly changed. He grabbed his subordinate's neck and pulled him to his eyes. He said in a ferocious voice, "Brat, you don't have the qualifications to covet someone of that level. You better respect the strong." This galactic pirate swallowed a mouthful of saliva nervously and nodded. Boss Bifuli's temper was unpredictable, and he did not dare to anger him. Bifuli let go of his hand, grabbed the wine glass, and finished the rest of the liquor in one gulp. He wiped his mouth, stood up, and walked toward the door with large strides. "Little ones, follow me." The few galactic pirates behind him hurriedly followed behind Bifuli and asked carefully, "Boss, what are we going to do now?" Chapter 534. At the dock square, many wanderers and galactic pirates that had stayed on floating dragons surrounded the Blacklight Stealth, pointing at it with envy and greed in their eyes. A spaceship from the Federation of Light, a high-end product. It was a pity that this expensive spaceship was Black Star's. On Floating Dragon, not many people dared to mess around, and they only dared to look at it. "Move!" Han Zhao's voice sounded from outside the crowd, and the hundreds of people surrounding the spaceship turned around. Their faces turned pale, and they hurriedly took a few steps back as though they had seen a ghost. Their eyes then landed on the tall lady beside Han Zhao, the owner of this floating island. "It's the Dragon Emperor!" Everyone broke out in a cold sweat. It was rare for outsiders to see Ames with their own eyes. Thinking about her strength and identity, these villains could not help but feel their legs turn to jelly, and they felt immense pressure. The two of them did not even look at this group of people, and walked side by side, passing through the crowd, stepping onto the gangway, and entering the spaceship. The black light stealth quickly took off, turning into a stream of light and disappearing into the vast universe. Everyone stared blankly as Ames followed Han Shao into the spaceship. Only after the spaceship left did they regain their senses, and a commotion broke out. The Dragon Emperor is out again! This time, she's actually together with Black Star. He's the leader of the field team. Is Ames going to do something? Black Star just arrived, and Ames left with him right after. I have a feeling that something big is going to happen. Ames' position was extremely high, and her every action would cause all kinds of guesses. These people that were docked on Floating Dragon were all well-informed people, and it was not hard to imagine that this news would quickly spread to the various organizations in the galaxy. However, for now, the news first spread on a large scale on Floating Dragon, causing even more people to be surprised, and it soon reached Jenny's ears. Jenny was dumbfounded. The moment she heard this news, she felt like she was about to collapse. Ames had always gone out to play, but she had always left alone. This time it was different. She actually left with Black Star? What exactly did Black Star say to Ames? Jenny was so angry that her lips were trembling. Black Star was now full of controversy, and she could already foresee that in the future, all kinds of trouble would come one after another, and the matters that she had to deal with would double. However, Ames was her boss. In the past, she could still make things difficult for Black Star, but now that her boss was personally causing trouble, what else could she do? Who could she reason with? The corners of Jenny's eyes twitched, and her crow's feet almost squeezed out. So King desperate. The spaceship that had entered hyperdrive turned on autopilot. Han Shao stood up from the pilot's seat and turned to look at Ames. It will take about 10 days to return to planet Aquamarine, and there are only the two of us on the spaceship. If you don't want to sleep, I'm happy to accompany you to kill time. This spaceship is not bad. Ames looked around and sized up the spaceship. Then, her gaze landed on Han Zhao's face and she smiled. Is there anything to drink? The two of them came to the resting hall, and Ames sat down lazily on the sofa with her long legs crossed. She supported her head with her left hand and did not care about showing off her seductive figure in front of others. She liked to maintain a position that made her comfortable. Han Shao opened the food cabinet, easily pried open the compartment, and took out a bottle of good wine that her Luz had hidden inside. He then took out 2 cups, placed them on the coffee table in front of Ames, and filled the 2 cups. He then picked up his own cup and sat opposite Ames. Ames curled her finger, and the wine cup on the table was grabbed by her force field, flying to her mouth steadily. She took a small sip, smiled, and said, "It tastes terrible." "Is that so? I think it's okay." Han Zhao's mouth twitched. Her Luz was not a human, after all, so his taste buds were probably a little different. Ames blinked, smiled, and said, "Let's talk about yourself. Ever since you joined Floating Dragon, I haven't gotten to know you properly." In Norias, Han Shao had helped her capture Aesop, and Ames was very grateful. She was not the kind of person who felt that it was normal for her subordinates to do things for her. Compared to the other 3 super strong people in the Shattered Star Ring, she was very casual. A few years ago, she did not pay much attention to Han Shao and only casually allowed him to join Floating Dragon because of Aesop. However, in just a few years, not only did Black Star gradually gain a foothold, his strength had also increased rapidly. Although it was still not much compared to her, the speed of his growth surprised her. Ames could not help but be interested in this officer under her command. Only then did she realize that her understanding of Han Shao was almost zero. Hearing that, Han Shao casually talked about his origins and naturally left out the information about the players. He started from the Germinal Organization test subjects, then talked about the Inhumans from the perspective of the planet Aquamarine people, and then talked about his officers. Ames listened attentively. After talking for a long time, Han Shao finally stopped and drank a mouthful of wine to moisten his throat. He was not against telling stories. This was a rare opportunity to be alone with Ames, and it was a good opportunity to get closer to her. Furthermore, Ames was a great beauty, and with Han Zhao's current strength, he would naturally not be swayed by her. However, it was still quite pleasing to the eye. At the very least, it was much better than the hairy and muscular Harmon. After listening to Han Zhao's story, Ames lightly tapped her thigh with a thoughtful expression. A pair of sisters who control life and death respectively. I think I've heard of them somewhere before. She was not concerned about politics, countries, or civilizations. Instead, it was the situation of Gila and Aurora that attracted her attention. Han Shao did not hide the story of Gila and Aurora. In his previous life, Gila, who embraced darkness, was even more intimidating than Ames when she was at her peak. However, Gila was still very weak now. However, there seemed to be something strange about this. Ames would usually not pay attention to what happened on a barbarian planet. If she had heard of such a situation, it would definitely have come from a very high level. You said that Erosia is a life form. Then, are the millions of similar space wonders the same principle? Han Shao shook his head and pretended to hesitate. It should be different. As soon as he said that, a change suddenly occurred in the resting hall. Streams of light suddenly condensed into a human figure. Rista appeared and sat beside Han Shao. Why did you come out? Han Shao asked. Ames' gaze also turned to Rista with a curious look on her face. Rista slowly stood up and bowed deeply toward Ames. His tone was sincere and urgent, and there was even a hint of begging in it. Your Majesty, I hope to beg you for one thing. I beg you to help my civilization and save my people. I am willing to pay the price and be at your beck and call forever. Earlier, Han Shao had also mentioned the situation of the life civilization. Rista knew that Ames was a big shot, and her strength was on the same level as that mechanic who had occupied his people. She had the ability to deal with that person. This was a chance to ask for help. Even if the chance of the Dragon Emperor agreeing was only 1 in 10,000, Rista was not willing to give up. If Ames was willing to help, everything would become simple. This seemingly impossible task would have hope of succeeding. Fight! Ames raised an eyebrow. Who are you talking about? He was a mechanic. He stole my home, enslaved almost all of my people, and turned them into his weapons. I will never forget his name. He was called Manison, the Ancient One Papaki. Oh, so it's the mechanic emperor of the primeval Star River. He is a member of the Ancient Ones. Ames shook her head. I reject your request. The primeval Star River was a large star field like the shattered star ring. The position of the mechanic emperor there was similar to the position of the Dragon Emperor Ames in the shattered star ring. The Ancient Ones was a special organization, and Ames' adoptive father, Aesop, was once a member of the Ancient Ones. However, he had left the group. Although Rista was mentally prepared, he was still very disappointed. He asked, May I know the reason for your rejection? Ames did not seem to mind. I can't defeat him. Rista's figure flickered as though he was shocked. Even you are not his match? Han Shao did not say anything. He was not surprised by this. Super was a general classification, and there were naturally strong and weak. Ames was very strong, but she was not invincible. Ames had never felt that she was invincible. 10 days passed in a flash. There was not much to do on the spaceship, so Han Shao chatted with Ames every day. Their relationship had become much closer, and the atmosphere was much more natural. Planet Aquamarine appeared outside the porthole, and numerous Godaran frigates were guarding the atmosphere. Upon noticing the blacklight stealth approaching, they immediately sent out a warning. Visitor, please verify your identity. It's me, Han Shao replied in the channel. Black Star, you can land now. The other party's tone softened. Although Ghidorah was currently in a crisis, and they had to be careful, Han Shao had fought alongside them in the past and had proven that he was not an enemy. After passing through, the Blacklight stealth landed in the sanctuary. Looking down at the sanctuary, the number of refugees seemed to have increased. Most of them were wearing restraint. In the period that Han Shao was not around, many dangers had occurred on planet Aquamarine, but they were all resolved. The players had done many things and lived a very fulfilling life. Darkstar did not attack the Calamity planets but instead went to harass the other colonies. This made the situation even more tense, and Ghidorah was in a terrible predicament. However, this did not affect Han Shao. The hatch opened and Ames floated out. She looked around and said, "Is this your homeworld? That's great. It's a pity that my homeworld has become an abandoned planet. Most of the Inhumans are at the square. I have something to take care of first," Han Shao said. Ames nodded and floated to the square alone, curiously looking at the players coming and going. A passing player subconsciously turned his head to look, and he was stunned. His mouth was wide open and his face was blank. Ain't I Ames? You know me?" Ames was surprised. She had thought that these Inhumans were natives and had not expected them to know her. More and more people noticed Ames, and all the players fell into a state of shock. The originally noisy square seemed to have been cast with some kind of magic, and with Ames at the center, the magic spread out continuously. The entire square gradually quietened down, and like a spring that had been pressed to the bottom, a certain emotion was brewing. Boom! The next moment, the exclamations of countless players rang out, resounding through the clouds. On the other side, Han Shao did not leave with Ames. Instead, he quickly arrived at the Godaran camp and requested to meet with Nagakin. The Godaran guard at the gate shook his head, and his reply was no different from half a month ago. "Black Star, His Excellency Nagakin is currently participating in an emergency meeting and does not have the time to meet you. Please return." Han Shao had a clear goal this time, and with a deep voice, he said, "Go and tell him that I have a new mutation source in my hands. I don't care what he is doing, I want him to meet me immediately." The guard's expression changed, and he did not dare make a decision on his own. He immediately reported to Nagakin. After waiting for less than 2 minutes at the gate, a streak of golden light shot out from the depths of the Godaran camp and stopped in front of him. Wherever the streak of golden light passed, a hole would be left in the building, and a long gash would be left on the ground. It was Nagakin. When Nagakin heard the reason for Han Zhao's visit, he was so shocked that he almost fell off his chair. How could he care about the meeting anymore? He could not even be bothered to walk, and rushed out to welcome Han Shao. Is what you said for real?" Nagakin had a nervous expression on his face. Han Shao took out the mutation source, which was sealed in a transparent sphere, and it attracted Nagakin's gaze like a magnet. "Let's talk inside." Han Shao waved his hands to block Nagakin's line of sight and chuckled. Chapter 535. As an officer of Floating Dragon, Han Shao was the only member of the armed forces that was active in the outside world. He was no longer a nobody, and information about him was all over the place. Naturally, the model of his mount was not a secret, and many people knew about it. The spaceships docked at Ubarely Hub were all placed in the hangar area, which was connected to the spaceport. From the outside, the spaceport looked like the windows of a skyscraper, densely packed. The spaceships landed in the spaceport and slid into the hangar that corresponded to the number of the spaceport. The Federation of Light's Blacklight stealth was like the Bugatti, Koenigsegg, and Lamborghini that sped past on the street. Many people turned their heads to look at the Blacklight stealth. It was a high-end and luxurious ship with a sleek body that was as black as a mirror. Bifuli easily found out the number of the Blacklight stealth's hangar after asking around at the Ubarely Hub. Hangar ad 0074SD, just as I thought. Ubarely has arranged a high-end hangar for him. Bifuli clicked his tongue and became more and more excited. The hangar with this number was located in the high-end area, and it was like a good location for a parking lot. The security was tighter and the facilities were better. For example, Bifuli's disguised plundering spaceships could only be parked in a normal hangar with the number E. After all, Han Shao was a famous mercenary group in the Garten star system, and he had been stationed in Ubarely Hub for a few years. His spaceship was also a high-end one, so the hub would naturally give him the best treatment. This made Bifuli feel that it was a little troublesome, and the difficulty of snatching the spaceship had increased. Bifuli knew that he did not have the confidence to deal with Han Shao. Black Star had been in the galaxy for so many years and had proven his strength. A year ago, he had even cooperated with Ghidorah to kill a Calamity-grade super in Norios. Bifuli did not dare underestimate him at all. As a galactic pirate, one's judgment was very important. However, Bifuli did not intend to give up on his plan. The blacklight stealth was too tempting. Black Star was not near the spaceship, so there was no need to fight him head-on. Furthermore, only Han Zhao's identity was verified, which meant that there was no one else on the spaceship. This was the best opportunity. He didn't dare to fight with Black Star, but he still had the guts to steal. Bifuli led more than a dozen galactic pirates, and passed through the complicated corridors of the hangar before arriving at the entrance of the Blacklight Stealth's hangar. In front of them was a thick and heavy alloy door, and they had to be verified before they could enter. However, that was the normal method. The galactic pirates' method was naturally more crude. Bifuli's eyes widened. The crimson color in his eyes started to burn. The solidified flames turned into flowing flames. The next moment, a thick pillar of fire spurted out from his eyes. The color was orange-red with a hint of blue. It was bright and blazing like a laser. The temperature was extremely terrifying. The heat waves rolled and licked the hangar door. The burned parts quickly turned red and the metal began to soften. Releasing flames with his eyes was Bifuli's special ability, which was also the origin of his nickname. The temperature of the flames continued to increase as he developed his ability. At first, it was only a few hundred degrees, but now, he could release a temperature of thousands of degrees, which was almost equivalent to the surface temperature of a star. It was not difficult for him to burn a hole in the hangar door. Ka. The alarm suddenly sounded. The surrounding walls suddenly slid open, and defense cannons extended out. They aimed at Bifuli and opened fire. The cannons fired, and the galactic pirates all took out their shield. The shields glowed with a yellow light. It was an energy shield that blocked the attacks of the cannons. The battle suit on Bifuli's body quickly transformed into a special heavy armor that covered his entire body. It was mainly for defense, and the cannons could not penetrate the armor. Only his eyes could release energy. Furthermore, the battle suit even had a device that enhanced his eye esper ability. The pillar of fire suddenly expanded and gradually turned a deep blue color. The temperature rose again. Bifuli looked around, and the pillar of fire followed his line of sight. It swept past the defense cannons and destroyed them within 2 seconds. The alarm was still ringing, and the guards of the hub were on their way. However, Bifuli had already burned a hole in the hangar door with his esper ability. His efficiency was extremely high. Walking into the hangar, the Blacklight Stealth quietly stopped in front of the galactic pirates. Everyone had a look of excitement on their faces. Ha, this spaceship is ours. Bifuli retracted his esper ability, and his eyes were filled with greed. He took out his communicator and shouted, "Is the stabilizer ready?" "No problem, boss. Our spaceship has already left the port. As long as you drive the Blacklight Stealth out of the port, we will be able to drag it away." The image of the vice-captain appeared on the communicator. There were 2 steps to stealing the spaceship. The first step was to enter the hangar and get close to the blacklight stealth. They would install a portable thruster and an electromagnetic absorber on the hull of the spaceship to get it moving and leave the spaceport. The second step was to have their own spaceship capture the blacklight stealth with an electromagnetic device in space and then escape. In a short period of time, the galactic pirates were unable to crack the AI system of the spaceship. They used a type of signal jammer that cut off long-distance communication to prevent the owner from remotely controlling the spaceship. As such, the spaceship became a piece of metal that they could do whatever they wanted with it. As long as they captured it, they would have time to modify it. Even if they could not crack the AI of the spaceship, they could still sell it at a high price in the black market. The Black Lion spaceship would naturally hire a mechanic to replace the AI of the spaceship. Basically, every black market ship merchant had a virtual mechanic under them. The galactic pirates were extremely familiar with this process. Basically, every galactic pirate stole a spaceship this way. Befuli's subordinates did not waste any time and quickly took out various devices, preparing to attach the thrusters and absorbers to the spaceship. On the other side, Befuli threw out a signal jammer that covered the entire blacklight stealth. This could temporarily cut off the remote control function. Even if Black Star knew that his spaceship had been stolen, he would not be able to stop it. By the time he arrives, we will have already snatched the spaceship. Befuli smiled and stepped onto the ladder. Flames burned in his eyes as he prepared to burn the hatch open. He was confident that with the temperature of his eyes, he would be able to burn through the armor of all spaceships other than the defensive ones. The defenses of the spaceship would also not be able to stop a Grade B super like him. Therefore, the spaceship was already his. Boom. Just as Befuli was about to use his Esper ability and the galactic pirates were about to attach the devices in their hands to the spaceship, the blacklight stealth suddenly moved. Its engine suddenly started, and the high-performance engine completed a microsecond warm-up and acceleration. Bang! The blacklight stealth directly tore apart the mechanism at the bottom of the spaceship and floated in midair. With an agile 360-degree spin, it threw everyone close to the spaceship out. Befuli fell heavily onto the wall of the hangar and looked up at the floating blacklight stealth. A laser beam was rapidly expanding in front of his eyes. What? The blinding light swallowed the shocked Befuli. Boom, boom, boom. Chapter 536. In the hall of the hub, Han Xiao was purchasing resources in the shop. Other than fuel and parts for the spaceship, Floating Dragon Island had also gotten him to purchase some items on their behalf when they heard that he was going back. While he was shopping, his communicator suddenly rang. Han Xiao took it out and glanced at it. He could not help but curl his lips before shoving the communicator back into his pocket and continuing to shop. After slowly picking out the items and paying for them, Han Xiao watched as the shop assistants moved the fuel and parts onto the hovering aircraft. At this moment, a hovering aircraft stopped in front of the shop. A staff member of the hub hurriedly ran down from the hovering aircraft and rushed toward Han Xiao. Your Excellency Black Star. Your spaceship. Han Xiao waved his hands and interrupted the other party. He smiled and said, "It's fine. Isn't it just a bunch of thieves who wanted to steal my spaceship? How many of them are still alive?" The staff member was stunned for a moment before nodding. When we arrived, there was only one person left alive, and he was severely injured. We have already captured him, but your spaceship is still intact. Let's go take a look. Han Xiao nodded and boarded the hovering aircraft, heading toward the hangar area. The staff member followed behind and arrived at the scene not long after. The door of the hangar was shattered, and the corridor outside was filled with charred marks. At this moment, many hub guards were surrounding the area. Beside the hangar, a burly man was tightly bound by electromagnetic restraints. His battle suit was riddled with holes, and his entire body was filled with wounds. He was on the verge of death. Han Xiao took a look and saw that the interior of the hangar was a mess. The walls were shattered, and all sorts of wires were exposed. Sparks were falling down like rain, making sizzling sounds. The lights were flickering, and the ground was stained with blood. More than 10 corpses were lying on the ground, covered with white cloth. Only the blacklight stealth was obediently parked on the ground. Its shell was as smooth as a mirror, and there was not a single scratch on it. This is the guy who wanted to steal my spaceship? Han Xiao walked toward the heavily injured Bifuli, and his eyes were filled with sympathy. The blacklight stealth was Rista's current body. He had long since received Rista's message, and wasn't anxious at all. These thieves were simply courting death for daring to target Rista. They were about to face a spaceship with sentient life, and it was even the blacklight stealth, a high-grade spaceship with superior performance and complete functions. Even if he had to deal with the blacklight stealth himself, it would be much more stressful than dealing with a few Grade B supers at the same time. Furthermore, there would not be a Calamity-grade super who would steal a spaceship for no reason. Even if it was a Calamity-grade super, the blacklight stealth would still be able to escape in an instant. Therefore, Han Xiao was not worried about the safety of the spaceship at all. Unless pigs could fly, it would not be stolen. Your Excellency Black Star, we've checked the database. This person is a space pirate from Fawn Galaxy. A staff member was holding a PDA with a transparent screen to introduce the situation. Han Xiao didn't wait for him to finish and directly took the PDA. After taking a look, Han Xiaoxin's head suddenly twitched. Bifuli, his special ability is to shoot fire from his eyes. Aren't those laser eyes? He's actually someone from the Purple Snake Space Pirates. I seem to have dealt with this group of space pirates before? Han Xiao recalled that the leader of this space pirate group seemed to be a relatively weak Calamity-grade super. Rolling his eyes, Han Xiao lifted Bifuli up and said, "This fellow wants to steal my spaceship. Leave him to me. It's only right. It's our negligence to have caused you to encounter danger." The staff member nodded. After dispersing the staff and guards, Han Xiao stepped onto the spaceship, found a room, and threw Bifuli heavily onto the ground. You dared to act rashly without doing a good job of intelligence gathering. If it were a normal spaceship, you might have really succeeded. You're really unlucky. What do you think? Han Xiao could not help but tease. Bifuli's wounds were still hurting, and he was in so much pain that he grimaced. He was still in a state of shock. He had clearly blocked the spaceship's signal, but the spaceship moved as though it had a life of its own. The laser cannons fired continuously, piercing through his combat suit very quickly. Bifuli was only good at attacking, and the flames released from his eyes were unable to block the energy of the laser cannons. Furthermore, physical defense was not his forte, and he was unable to withstand the continuous damage from the laser cannons. If not for the guards arriving at the crucial moment, he would have most likely been shot to death by this strange spaceship. Now that he had landed in Black Star's hands, Bifuli was filled with regret. He did not know what the other party would do to him. Since Black Star did not kill me, it's most likely because he feels that I have some value. This is good news. He probably wants to interrogate me for information, so I have to cooperate. I have to calm him down and not let him have the intention to kill me. My Esper ability is very destructive, and as long as Black Star is careless, I will be able to escape. Bifuli's palms were sweating, and all sorts of thoughts flashed through his mind. Although he was a rough galactic pirate, when it came to his life, his mind worked very quickly. As long as he did not die, there was still a chance. Han Xiao patted Bifuli's shoulder. You are an officer of the Purple Snake Galactic Pirates, so I will put this debt on Purple Snake's head. I don't have the time to deal with them now, but it's good. After a period of time, my mercenary group will need many targets to practice with, and Purple Snake seems to be a good choice. When the time comes, I will personally look for your leader to play. As for you, Han Shao looked straight into Befuli's eyes, revealing a playful smile. Since you delivered yourself to me, don't blame me. Befuli subconsciously felt a chill run down his spine. Before he could think about what Han Shao meant, he suddenly felt a pain in his arm. Black Star took out a disc-shaped machine and pressed it against the blood vessels in his arm. There was a slight pain, as though a needle had been inserted. Before Befuli had the time to be confused, he suddenly felt his strength rapidly draining away. Bright red blood gradually accumulated in the empty slot of the disc-shaped machine. He could not help but widen his eyes, and a sense of weakness arose. His Esper ability had already become a part of him, just like his arms and legs. However, at this moment, Befuli's sense of his Esper ability was gradually weakening, as though he was losing his Esper ability. This way, his last reliance was gone. What's going on? Befuli's expression changed drastically, and he panicked. The current situation was beyond his expectations. Super Gene Extractor. In the past year, Han Shao had rarely used this juicer, mainly because he had not caught any villains. The previous Rizar had already been sucked dry, and there was no way for him to continue developing. Thus, Han Shao helped Rizar get rid of it. Now, other than occasionally squeezing his own juice to store ability potions, he basically did not use it on anyone else. Since Befuli took the initiative to come to him, Han Shao did not feel guilty at all. Since he was an enemy, he had to make the best use of him. The ability to shoot fire from the eyes was both cool and strong. He felt that it was very nice. You have received a character summon card, Befuli, temporary. Character summon card, Befuli, temporary, incandescent eyes. Shoots out a high-temperature fire pillar from the eyes, causing burning damage. Target with line of sight. Max range, 400 meters. Attack range, 510 to 1360. Generates 3 attacks per second. Lasts for 5 seconds. Number of uses, 0/1. Character summon card will exist for 15 days. Wow, this damage is quite high. As expected of a pure attack Esper ability. Han Zhao's eyes sparkled. If he could burn for 5 seconds, the lowest theoretical damage would be over 7,600, and the highest would be a lot of damage. Furthermore, it was an AoE skill. Even when facing a grade B enemy, after deducting the enemy's resistance, he would be able to deal at least 3,000 to 4,000 damage. Furthermore, shooting out from the eyes was equivalent to giving away extra damage. Han Shao lowered his head and smiled at Befuli. We have to get along well in the future. Befuli lay on the ground, his body trembling. The way he looked at Han Shao was like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. In his eyes, Black Star was more than 100 times scarier than him, a galactic pirate. He suddenly had a feeling that his life in the future might very well be worse than death. Han Shao managed to find out the existence of his accomplices from Befuli. However, when Befuli failed, the other galactic pirates had already escaped with their spaceship. Han Shao did not want to waste any time, so he did not turn around to chase after these galactic pirates. He had already treated the Purple Snake space pirates as nourishment for the players in the future, so he was not in a hurry to deal with this organization. The Blacklight stealth set off again. After this small episode, they did not stop along the way, so they did not encounter anything else. A few days later, Floating Dragon Island, which was drifting in the universe, appeared in front of them. Han Shao piloted the spaceship and landed. Floating Dragon had already known about the return of this comrade. Wilsander was waiting at the dock to welcome Han Shao. Logistics Manager Hire was also there. What surprised Han Shao was that Jenny, who had some unhappiness with him, was also standing at the side with a long face. She was obviously there to welcome him. Ha ha ha, Black Star, you're back again. Wilsander laughed loudly, his tail wagging as he came up to Han Shao and gave him a big hug. Han Shao tilted his head and was almost stabbed in the eye by Wilsander's devil horns. G. Hire said something in the Zerg language before realizing that he was not wearing a translator. After putting on the translator with his limbs, he said, "Black Star, did you bring back the rare materials I asked for?" "They're all on the ship." Han Shao nodded. After thinking for a while, he added, "Remember to reimburse me. It's very expensive." Then, Han Shao turned to look at Jenny and said with surprise, "Why are you here to welcome me? Do you think I want to?" Jenny was expressionless and said unwillingly, "Ames wants to see you." "Yo, how rare." Han Shao was a little surprised. Ever since he helped Ames find Aesop, they had not contacted each other. He did not know why she was looking for him this time. Just as the few of them were chatting, the people at the dock all looked over and whispered to each other. Their eyes were filled with curiosity. "That's the 4 troops of Floating Dragon. I didn't expect them to gather together. Is that man in black Floating Dragon's field Team Black Star? I heard that the Dragon Emperor wants to expand her forces, and Black Star is expanding her armed forces. He has a lot of authority. I heard that Black Star stepped into the Garten star system. I wonder if it was the Dragon Emperor's idea. Could it be that she wants to get involved as well?" Han Zhao's actions of expanding his mercenary group had already attracted some attention in the galaxy. Many people felt that it was Ames' idea. They thought that this was a signal. The Dragon Emperor, who had always been aloof from worldly affairs, finally wanted to obtain an organization that was comparable to a Beyond Grade A. Chapter 537. After handing the goods over to Hire, Han Shao bade farewell to the 3 of them, left the dock, entered the city, and headed straight to the Dragon Emperor's palace. If Ames wants to see me, it's most likely to be about 2 things. The first is about Aesop, and the second is about my expansion of the mercenary group. It could also be that she hasn't seen me for too long and misses me a lot. She wants to see my handsome face. Along the way, Han Shao thought to himself, Ames had always been a hands-off boss and rarely summoned her officers, so the chances of her talking about serious matters were probably not high. Han Zhao's eyes suddenly flashed. Right, it's not easy to see her. It would be great if I could get another Dragon Emperor character summon card. Completing the mission of digging up Blue Star's history had given him a chance to obtain a random reward. He did not have much confidence in his luck, and was prepared to draw a few in a row. However, plans could not keep up with changes. It would be great if he could draw a blank character summon card now. The Dragon Emperor character summon card previously had helped him kill a Calamity grade super. The more trump cards he had, the better. Opening the interface, Han Shao directly activated the random reward. Randomizing. Randomizing complete. The type of reward you have obtained is Talent. Oh, my luck is not bad. Han Zhao's eyes sparkled. Although it was not a character summon card, talents were the type that was guaranteed to be profitable. No matter how trashy a talent was, it would still be useful. Randomizing. Randomization complete. Please choose one of the 3 talents below. Resilient Spirit Wall. Plus 20% mental resistance flexible weapon application. Plus 12% weapon base damage when using all types of weapons, including but not limited to cold weapons, firearms, mechanical weapons, magic weapons, rare treasures, etc. Haste. Increases movement speed and evasion rate. Effect depends on DX and cannot exceed 30%. Han Shao looked at it and quickly made a choice. He already had Advanced Mental Resilience, which gave him plus 35% mental resistance and 30% reduction in the duration of negative mental statuses. It could also reduce the difficulty of judgment. Spirit Barrier had a single and repetitive effect, so it was less cost-effective. Rapid Step was not a bad talent, but it could only be maximized by agility-type supers. His combat style no longer required speed, and with void travel, he did not need to worry about dodging. Furthermore, his mechanical suit and thrusters could make up for his agility. Most of the time, he would take the positional approach and use weapons like turrets and oathkeepers. As a mechanic, most of the time, he relied on mechanical weapons to unleash his strength. Flexible weapon application was the most suitable for him. Although a 12% bonus was not high, it was not completely useless. When it came to things like attack power, every little bit counted. It was just like the size of a man, even a centimeter longer was a good thing. Most importantly, this talent was different from machinery affinity. Only weapons connected by mechanical force could enjoy the bonus of machinery affinity, and it would consume energy. Although the consumption was very low, it would be very difficult for his mechanical force to take care of all the machines when he was using human wave tactics. However, this talent gave all the weapons a bonus by default. It was very overbearing. Han Xiao chose flexible weapon application directly with a satisfied expression. After all, most of the random reward talents were relatively common, and rare talents rarely appeared, let alone molding talent. This effect was already quite good. Speaking of molding talents, his two molding talents, intermediate strengthened life and a steel body, were both obtained by chance. Because players could not obtain molding talents, and there was no relevant information in his previous life, Han Xiao had some vague ideas about more molding talent. The best thing to do was definitely to upgrade intermediate strengthened life, which was to inject the gene extract of some powerful cosmic lifeforms. However, there was a risk of genetic mutation, so he did not act rashly. Currently, intermediate strengthened life gave him an additional 130 endurance to health ratio, which was also the reason why he was so tanky. If he upgraded this talent again, Han Xiao estimated that he would be a tank even among bosses of the same level. Just spitting out blood would be enough to drown his enemies. Aim's palace was still grand. When the guards saw Han Xiao, they all showed respect and took the initiative to open a path for Han Xiao to enter the palace. In the depths of the palace, the floating black throne was empty. Han Xiao looked around but did not see Ames. Who? Suddenly, a light green force field surged from the front. It was like a large ball of transparent air with a crystal-like green edge. The tip was oval, and the front had a diameter of 10 meters, just like an energy wave. Boom, 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 the surrounding air was rolled up, and an invisible pressure was exerted on it, making a sound like an air explosion. Han Xiao narrowed his eyes and put his hands together. The 6 mechanical hands spread out and opened their 5 fingers. The fingers lit up with a bright yellow light, forming a small shield. The thrusters on the wrist shot out blue fire, and the 6 mechanical hands blocked in front of him, fiercely resisting the force field. Boom! The two collided, and a muffled sound was heard. The force field and the mechanical hands were in a deadlock. The mechanical hands were constantly trembling, and the force field was also squeezed out of shape. The lost power dissipated and formed a radial green air wave on the horizontal plane of contact. Boom! The next moment, the force field exploded on the spot, bursting out an even larger air wave. It spread out in circles like ripples, and the fine dust on the ground was rolled up into smoke, reaching the height of one's calf. Han Zhao's hair was blown up, and the strong wind hit him in the face. He could not help but squint his eyes. Ames slowly floated out from the small door beside the throne and sat on it. This time, she was wearing a long purple dress with a slit, looking very elegant. Her long hair cascaded down lazily like a waterfall, and it was still the same. Her exquisite and beautiful face seemed to have frozen her age, without a single wrinkle. The corners of her eyes and brows were filled with the charm left behind by the passage of time. She supported her smooth and white chin with one hand, and her sleeves slid down to her forearm, revealing her slender wrist. She looked at Han Xiao with a smile that was not a smile. The first time I saw you, you were almost crushed by my force field. I used the same amount of strength just now, but you can easily resist it now. It has only been 2 years. Black Star, the speed at which you become stronger is really beyond my expectations. Ames laughed lightly. Her lazy voice had a hint of a woman's unique hoarseness. Just her voice alone was enough to explain the meaning of sex appeal. When the force field attack appeared, Han Xiao knew that this was a casual test by Ames. If it had been when he had just entered the galaxy, it would have been very difficult for him to block such an attack, but now it was so easy without any pressure. Ames' charm was too high. Every time Han Xiao saw her, he could not help but be stunned. However, he was very experienced. He immediately glanced at Ames' washboard figure, and his heart was as clear as ice. He would not be shocked even if the sky collapsed, and he nodded calmly. "Your Majesty Dragon Emperor, why are you looking for me? Didn't I tell you before? You can call me Ames." Ames curled her lips. "Actually, there's nothing much. Recently, Jenny has been protesting against your actions of expanding the armed forces. Let me ask you, do you have any thoughts? Of the 4 famous beyond grade A supers in the Shattered Star Ring, Floating Dragon was the weakest. Now that Han Xiao was expanding his forces, many organizations in the Shattered Star Ring misunderstood his intentions and thought that the Dragon Emperor wanted to expand her forces like the other 3 and become stronger. Ames did not care about what others thought. She was not interested in expanding her forces at all. Originally, she was too lazy to ask Han Xiao about the expansion of the mercenary group and silently allowed Han Xiao to act under her banner, maintaining a high level of trust in him. However, Jenny kept mentioning this matter and strongly objected to the expansion. Her reason made Ames speechless. She said that Han Xiao's expansion had caused a chain reaction, and many organizations expressed goodwill or tried to test him. This caused her to deal with many times more matters every day than before. The work pressure was too great and she was losing hair every day. She felt that she would age prematurely. She objected to this and said that if Ames did not hire an additional officer, she should not let Black Star expand. Therefore, Ames wanted to know Han Xiao's thoughts. She did not mind. If Han Xiao had a good idea, Ames would not mind supporting it. After all, Aesop, who had been captured by Han Xiao, was enjoying his retirement on Floating Dragon Island. It was best to let Aesop share Jenny's work. Hearing this, Han Xiaoxin's heart skipped a beat. "Do you remember Aroshia?" Ames thought for a while and said, "She seems to be an indestructible space wonder. I saw her on the island before, and I couldn't kill her. She was taken away by you, right? I found millions of space wonders with the same characteristics, and they have extraordinary potential. They can communicate with each other just like normal people." "Millions?" Ames was stunned, and curiosity appeared in her eyes. "They are from my hometown and suddenly appeared a few years ago. I have a feeling that they will become a force that cannot be ignored in the galaxy in the future, so I have to recruit them as soon as possible." Han Xiao was not lying. He was very clear about the potential of the players, and his tone was very firm. "There is such a fun thing." Ames was a little surprised. "No, I have to see it for myself." Han Xiao's mouth twitched, and he suddenly had a headache. He had dug a hole for himself. Although bringing Ames along would ensure his safety, he would have to find an excuse to hand over his original body when he returned. If Nagajin was stubborn and directly asked Ames about this matter, wouldn't he be exposed? With a dry cough, Han Xiao tactfully said, "Ames, Dark Star and Godora are fighting again. The situation in the Garten star system is a little complicated, and my hometown is also involved. Why don't you come back after this storm is over?" "Dark Star again, what is there to be afraid of?" Ames said unhappily. "I hate waiting. I will take your ship back later. If Dark Star appears, I will smash them." Han Xiao slapped his forehead, not knowing whether to be happy or helpless. "Damn, Dark Star is going to be unlucky again. He really did not call Ames over on purpose this time. Jenny returned to her office, took off her glasses, rubbed the bridge of her nose, and sighed. The Dragon Emperor wants to see Black Star, probably to ask about the armed forces. Black Star is deeply trusted by her, so Ames will most likely not interrupt his mission. Sigh. Thinking of Han Shao, Jenny could not help but feel angry. Due to the unhappiness from the previous loan, she had a lot of opinions about Han Shao. After that, she had tried all kinds of methods, but there was no way to reduce Ames' trust in him. At this point, no matter how unhappy Jenny was, she could only accept the existence of this colleague. Putting on her glasses again, Jenny browsed through the backlog of documents. Suddenly, she thought of something and pulled out a document about the storm in the Garten star system. Recently, the Garten star system has not been peaceful, and many organizations have been paying attention to this matter. According to the black market, the evil organizations in the Shattered Star Ring that are as famous as Dark Star or even more infamous than Dark Star are also paying attention to this matter. This is the most lively matter during this period of time. Black Star happens to be active in that area and is also involved in this matter. Currently, he is on Ghidorah's side. Luckily, he knows what he is doing and did not use Floating Dragon's name to interfere. Otherwise, I will not let him off. Jenny snorted coldly. The way she saw it, since Floating Dragon was neutral, it was best to stay as far away from this sensitive matter as possible. She was very unhappy with Han Shao, but she could not control him. Nominally, the two of them were of the same rank and were in charge of different departments. Ghidorah and Dark Star are in an uproar, and I don't know when it will end. Anyway, this storm has nothing to do with Floating Dragon, so it will be fine as long as it does not cause me any trouble. Chapter 538. In the plaza of the dock, many wanderers and galactic pirates who stayed on Floating Dragon Island surrounded the Blacklight stealth and pointed at it. Their eyes were filled with envy and greed. The spaceship of the Radiant Federation, a high-end product. Unfortunately, this expensive spaceship belonged to Black Star. On Floating Dragon Island, not many people dared to mess around with it. They only dared to look at it. Move aside. Han Zhao's voice sounded from outside the crowd. The hundreds of people around the spaceship all turned to look, and their faces turned pale. Everyone hurriedly took a few steps back as though they had seen a ghost. Many pairs of eyes looked at the tall woman beside Han Shao. She was the owner of this floating island. It's the Dragon Emperor. Everyone broke out in cold sweat. Outsiders rarely had the chance to see Ames with their own eyes. Thinking of her strength and identity, these hoodlums could not help but feel their legs turn to jelly, and they felt an immense pressure. The two of them did not even look at this group of people. They walked side by side, passed through the crowd, stepped onto the gangway, and entered the spaceship. The Blacklight stealth quickly took off, turned into a stream of light, and disappeared into the vast universe. Everyone looked at Ames follow Han Shao onto the spaceship in a daze. Only when the spaceship left did they regain their senses. The Dragon Emperor went out again. She actually went out with Black Star this time. He is the leader of the field team. Is Ames going to do something? Black Star just arrived and Ames left with him. I have a feeling that something big is going to happen. Ames' position was extremely high, and her every action would cause all sorts of guesses. These people who were stationed on Floating Dragon Island were all well informed, and it was not hard to imagine that this piece of news would quickly spread to the ears of the various organizations in the galaxy through these channels. However, for now, the news first spread on Floating Dragon Island, causing even more people to be surprised. Very quickly, it reached Jenny's ears. Jenny's face was filled with confusion. The moment she heard this news, she had a mental breakdown. Ames often went out to play, but she always left alone. This time, it was different. She actually ran away with Black Star? Just what did Black Star say to Ames? Jenny was so angry that her lips were trembling. Now that Black Star was controversial, she could already foresee that in the future, all kinds of troubles would come one after another, and the number of matters she had to deal with would double. However, Ames was the boss. In the past, she could still bully Black Star. But now that the boss was personally stirring up trouble, what else could she do? Who could she reason with? The corners of Jenny's eyes twitched, and her crow's feet were almost squeezed out. So King hopeless. The spaceship entered the hyperdrive state, and Han Xiao stood up from the pilot's seat and turned to look at Ames. It'll take about 10 days to get back to Blue Star. There's only the two of us on the ship. If you don't want to sleep, I'm happy to accompany you to kill some time. This ship is not bad. Ames looked around and sized up the ship. Then, she turned to look at Han Xiao and smiled. Is there anything to drink? The two of them came to the lounge, and Ames sat down lazily. Her long legs were crossed as she lay on her side on the sofa and supported her head with her left hand. She did not mind showing off her seductive figure in front of others at all. She liked to maintain a posture that made her comfortable. Han Xiao opened the food cabinet, pried open the compartment, and took out a bottle of good wine that Ames had hidden inside. He then took out 2 glasses and placed them on the coffee table in front of Ames. He poured 2 glasses, then took one of his and sat opposite Ames. Ames hooked her finger, and the wine glass on the table was grabbed by her force field and flew to her mouth. She took a small sip, smiled, and said, "The taste is so bad." "Is that so? I think it's okay." Han Zhao's mouth twitched. After all, her Luz was not a human, so his sense of taste was probably different. Ames blinked, smiled, and said, "Let's talk about yourself. Ever since you joined Floating Dragon Island, I haven't gotten to know you properly." In Norios, Han Xiao had helped her capture Aesop, and Ames was very grateful. She was not the kind of person who felt that it was right for her subordinates to do things for her. Compared to the other 3 super strong people in the Shattered Star Ring, she was very casual. A few years ago, she did not value Han Xiao and only allowed Han Xiao to join Floating Dragon Island because of Aesop. However, in just a few years, not only did Black Star gradually gain a foothold, but his strength also increased rapidly. Although he was still nothing compared to her, the speed of his growth surprised her. Ames could not help but become interested in this officer under her command. Only then did she realize that her understanding of Han Xiao was close to zero. Hearing this, Han Xiao casually talked about his background, naturally leaving out the information about the players. He started from the Germinal Organization test subjects, then the Inhumans incident from the perspective of the Blue Star people, and then talked about his own officers. Ames listened attentively. After talking for a long time, Han Xiao finally stopped and drank a mouthful of wine to moisten his throat. He was not against telling stories, and this was a rare opportunity to be alone with Ames. It was a good chance to get closer to her, and it was beneficial. Furthermore, Ames was a great beauty, and with Han Zhao's current strength, of course, he would not be controlled by her. However, it was still quite pleasing to the eye. At least, it was much better than Harmon, who had thick hair and a muscular body. After listening to Han Zhao's story, Ames' right hand lightly tapped on her thigh, and she had a thoughtful expression. A pair of sisters who control life and death respectively. I seem to have heard of it somewhere before. She did not care about politics, countries, or civilizations. Instead, it was the situation between Hela and Aurora that attracted her attention. Han Xiaoxin's heart skipped a beat. He did not hide the story of Hela and Aurora. In his previous life, Hela, who embraced darkness, was at her peak, and her deterrence in the galaxy was even greater than Ames. However, now that Hela was still very weak, there seemed to be something strange about it. Ames would not normally pay attention to the happenings of a primitive planet. If she had heard of something similar, the information must have come from a very high level. You just said that Erosia is a life. Then, are the millions of similar space wonders also based on the same principle? Han Shao shook his head and pretended to hesitate. It should be different. As soon as he said that, there was a sudden change in the lounge. Buzz. Streaks of light suddenly condensed into a human figure. Rista appeared and sat beside Han Shao. Why did you run out? Han Shao was puzzled. Ames' gaze also turned to Rista with a curious expression. Rista slowly stood up and bowed deeply to Ames. His tone was sincere and urgent, and there was even a hint of pleading. Your Majesty Dragon Emperor, I hope to beg you for something. I beg you to help my civilization and save my race. I'm willing to pay the price and be under your command forever. Han Shao had also mentioned the situation of the life civilization, and Rista knew that Ames was a major character. Her strength was on the same level as that mechanic who had taken over his race, and she had the ability to deal with that person. This was a chance to ask for help. Even if the probability of the Dragon Emperor agreeing was 1 in 10,000, Rista was not willing to give up. If Ames was willing to help, everything would become simple. There would be hope for success in this seemingly impossible task. Fight! Ames raised her brows. Who's the opponent you're talking about? It's a mechanic who snatched my homeland and enslaved almost all of my race, turning them into his weapons. I will never forget his name. He's called Manison, Ancient One Papatch. Oh, so it's the Mecha Empire of the primeval Star River. He's a member of the Ancient Ones. Ames shook her head. I reject your request. The primeval Star River was a large star field like the Shattered Star Ring. The position of the Mecha Empire, Manison, was similar to the position of the Dragon Emperor, Ames, in the Shattered Star Ring. The Ancient Ones was a special organization, and Ames' adoptive father, Aesop, was once a member of the Ancient Ones. However, he had left the group. Although Rista was mentally prepared, he was still very disappointed. May I know the reason for your rejection? Ames replied nonchalantly, I can't beat him. Rista's figure trembled as though he was shocked. Even you are not his match? Han Shao did not say anything. He was not surprised by this. Super was a general classification, and there were naturally strong and weak ones. Ames was very strong, but she was not invincible. Ames had never thought that she was invincible. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye, and there was not much to do on the ship. Han Shao chatted with Ames every day, and their relationship was much closer. The atmosphere was much more natural. Blue Star appeared outside the porthole, and Ghidorah frigates were guarding the atmosphere. When they noticed the Blacklight stealth approaching, they immediately sent out a warning. Intruder, please verify your identity. It's me, Han Shao replied in the channel. Black Star, you can land now. The other party's tone calmed down. Although Ghidorah was in a dangerous situation and had to be careful, Han Shao had fought alongside them before, and he had already proven that he was not an enemy. After being approved, the Blacklight stealth landed in the sanctuary. Looking down at the sanctuary, it seemed that the number of refugees had increased again, and most of them were wearing restraints. During the time that Han Shao was not around, Blue Star had encountered many dangers, but they were all resolved one by one. The players had done many things and lived very fulfilling lives. Dark Star did not attack the Calamity Planet. Instead, it went to harass the other colonies, making the situation even more tense. Ghidorah became more and more anxious, but this did not affect Han Shao. The cabin door opened and Ames floated out. She looked around and said, Is this your hometown? How nice. It's a pity that my hometown has become a deserted planet. The Inhumans are all at the plaza. I won't accompany you for now. There are some things that I need to settle first, Han Shao said. Ames nodded and floated to the plaza alone, curiously looking at the players coming and going. A passing player subconsciously turned around and was stunned. His mouth was wide open and his face was blank. AI Ames? You know me? Ames was surprised. She had thought that these Inhumans were all natives. She did not expect them to know her. More and more people noticed Ames, and the players fell into shock. The originally noisy plaza seemed to have been enchanted with some kind of magic. With Ames as the center, the magic continued to spread, and the entire plaza gradually quieted down. It was like a spring that had been pressed to the bottom, and some kind of emotion was brewing. Boom! The next moment, countless players cried out in shock, shaking the clouds. On the other side, Han Shao did not leave with Ames. He quickly arrived at Ghidorah's camp and requested to meet with Nagajan. The Ghidorah guard at the gate shook his head, and his reply was no different from half a month ago. Black Star, His Excellency Nagajan is currently in an emergency meeting and does not have time to meet you. Please return. Han Zhao's target was clear this time, and he said with a deep voice, "Immediately tell him that I have a new mutation source in my hands. I don't care what he is doing, but I want him to meet me immediately." The guard's face changed, and he did not dare to make a decision on his own. He quickly reported to Nagajan. After waiting for less than 2 minutes at the gate, a golden light charged out from the depths of Ghidorah's camp and stopped in front of him. Wherever he passed, a hole would be smashed in the buildings, and a deep trench would be left on the ground. It was Nagajan. When Nagajan learned of the purpose of Han Zhao's visit, he was so shocked that he almost fell off his chair. How could he still be bothered about the meeting? He immediately rushed out to welcome Han Shao, not even wanting to waste time walking. Is what you said for real?" Nagajan's face was filled with nervousness. Han Shao took out the mutation source that was sealed in a transparent sphere, and it attracted Nagajan's gaze like a magnet. "Let's go in and talk." Han Shao waved his hand to block Nagajan's gaze and chuckled. Chapter 539. The two of them arrived at the conference room, and a human-shaped hole had been left in the wall of the room. Nagajan sternly instructed the guards not to let anyone in. He then closed the door and stared at the mutation source that Han Shao had placed on the table with a fiery gaze. He walked over to the table and observed it carefully. A pool of black liquid was sealed in a transparent sphere, and its shape was slowly changing. "Are you sure that this is the source of the mutation disaster?" Nagajan stared at it without blinking. After pausing for a moment, he added, "It is not that I do not trust you, but this is an important matter, and I have to be sure." Han Shao could understand Nagajan's caution and slowly said, "Relax, this is an unopened mutation source. 2 years ago, when I was carrying out a mission, I coincidentally met Dark Star's cargo. This was what they were transporting, and I snatched it from Dark Star. I did not know what it was, so I handed it over to Floating Dragon Island. When the mutation disaster broke out, I browsed through a lot of information and gradually confirmed that this black, viscous liquid was the mutation source. Half a month ago, I came to find you to talk about this matter. However, you were busy at that time, so I went back alone to retrieve the item." Nagajan slapped his head and said regretfully, "You should have contacted me earlier." Han Shao shrugged, expressing his helplessness. "With this mutation source, you should be able to develop the antidote as soon as possible, right? I am not a researcher, and everything will have to wait for the conclusion of the research department." Nagajan clenched his fists and could not contain his excitement. "However, it will definitely increase the speed of the research." Ghidorah's researchers had been researching the mutation disaster and trying to develop an antidote. However, they could only start from the infected and lacked information on the mutation source. However, if they had the mutation source, they would be able to conduct more experiments and find the right antidote. Their research speed would increase by leaps and bounds. The earlier they could resolve the mutation disaster, the earlier they could prevent the situation from worsening. This meant that with Han Zhao's item, Ghidorah could break the situation created by Dark Star and turn the tables. At this time, Han Shao interrupted Nagajan's fantasy and said with a smile, "Don't misunderstand. I didn't say that I would give it to you." "What?" Nagajan looked over abruptly with a stunned expression. There was a hint of enmity in his eyes. Ghidorah was determined to obtain this item, even if it was Black Star. "Don't be so nervous. What I mean is that I can give you the item, but I need something in return. I'm a mercenary, and I prefer to solve problems through transactions." In other words, Han Shao placed his hands under his chin and asked, "How much is Ghidorah willing to pay for this mutation source?" "I see." Nagajan narrowed his eyes and calmed down a little. A thought flashed through his mind. At such a crucial moment, Black Star had suddenly taken out a crucial item to break the situation. That was very strange. Perhaps Black Star only wanted to make a fortune from the war, but there was also a small possibility that Black Star and Dark Star had an inhumane relationship. All this time, Black Star had caused quite a lot of damage to Dark Star. The first impression that Black Star gave to a normal person was that the two of them were mortal enemies, and it was impossible for it to be a ruse. However, this kind of thinking was fixed. If Dark Star endured the humiliation and did not take revenge but instead contacted Black Star privately, paying a high price to cooperate with Black Star, it was possible. Black Star was a mercenary that fought for money, and Nagajan did not have high hopes for a mercenary's moral integrity. It was not that he was overthinking, but it was better to be safe than sorry. Now that Dark Star was in such a critical situation, he had no choice but to consider all the risk. After all, Black Star had suddenly taken out a crucial item for Dark Star. Even if the other party had explained the source of the item clearly, it was still hard to believe. These thoughts flashed past his mind, and Nagajan pondered for a moment before saying with a deep voice, "Does Floating Dragon know about your actions?" He secretly decided to contact Floating Dragon privately. Floating Dragon naturally would not cooperate with Dark Star, and he would only be at ease if Floating Dragon confirmed Han Zhao's words. Of course they know. Han Shao had already expected this. He chuckled in his heart and shrugged. "If you're worried, you can ask Ames. I've already brought her over." Plop! Nagakin's foot slipped, and he fell directly under the table. He then got up with a dumbfounded expression. "Why were you brought the Dragon Emperor to this planet?" "That's right, she's at the plaza." Nagajan stared at Han Shao in disbelief. "Oh my god, gal! What kind of person is Ames?" "She was actually called over by Black Star. She is Black Star's boss. Just how much authority does this fellow have on Floating Dragon? Am I playing Wayne cards? Bastard! I have nothing else to ask." Nagajan smiled bitterly. All right, since Black Star had already pulled such a big shot over, it was obvious that he was not afraid of confronting them. What was there to doubt? It was definitely true. No matter what, there was no way he would suspect that Ames was related to Dark Star. After all, Dark Star did not have the qualifications to do so. Han Zhao's expression was normal. On the way back, he had already told Ames about the mutation source. It was not something that could not be revealed, and there was no need for him to hide it from Ames. Han Shao understood her and knew that she would not care about such a small matter. If it was Jenny, she would probably have slammed the table and roared. As expected, Ames did not have much interest in this matter, so Han Shao did not have any worries. "Black Star, this matter is very important. I need to inform the upper echelons. You can raise your conditions with them." Nagajan did not hesitate and took out his communicator. He contacted the upper echelons and explained the situation. Cries of disbelief could be heard from the communicator. The various departments were racking their brains to think of a way to contain the situation, and this piece of news made them overjoyed. Not only did it reach the War Bureau, it even reached the table of the highest leader of Ghidorah. The upper echelons of Ghidorah were in an uproar. Very quickly, Godora sent a few of the upper echelons to deal with this matter. The images of a few of them appeared at the same time, and they immediately looked at Han Shao. "You are Black Star? Just say it directly. What conditions do you have?" The few upper echelons had solemn expressions and were prepared to pay a huge price. However, the upper echelons of Godora were not unhappy about this. Since it was a transaction, it was only right for them to pay the price. Asking someone to give up their resources for free was a hooligan act. Even if Ames was not here, they would not act like hooligans. Those in their positions would not casually make enemies. Could a problem that could be solved with money be called a problem? Han Zhao's eyes flashed and he smiled. Then let's talk about it in detail. In the next hour, both parties engaged in an intense negotiation. The few upper echelons of Godora would occasionally argue and discuss their conditions. Step by step, they reached a conclusion that both parties could accept. In front of these upper echelons, even Nagajin did not have the right to speak. After a long time, the argument finally stopped. "We accept your conditions. When this matter is settled, we will fulfill the agreement we made today," one of the upper echelons said solemnly. While this deal was akin to taking advantage of the situation, Han Shao did not ask for an exorbitant price. The conditions that he had proposed were all conditions that he had already thought of, and he did not raise the price. This attitude of his made the upper echelons of Godora feel much more comfortable. Han Shao nodded and was in a good mood. The outcome of the negotiation was much better than he had expected. Just as he had guessed, Godora understood the situation that they were in and urgently needed him to provide them with a way out. With such a premise, the negotiation was much easier. Godora was extremely sincere and agreed to most of his conditions. Furthermore, they were all in a hurry to make the final decision. The upper echelons who had the authority to make the decision were all the upper echelons, so the negotiation was extremely efficient. The mutation source was exchanged for many things. First, there was a sum of money, 3 million anas, which was directly transferred over to replenish his funds and fill up his wallet. Then, there was the supply of resources that would last for a few years. This included all sorts of machinery, raw materials, and specialties. These were all high-quality products that were manufactured in the military factory, including finished products such as spaceship. There were thousands of products that were sold at the lowest cost price. Other than these practical benefits, there were also requirements such as status, special treatment, and access to certain areas. The goal was to increase the reputation of the mercenary group, his own status, and MP resources. These conditions had to be fulfilled by Godora in the long run. He was not worried that Godora would go back on their word. His identity as Floating Dragon was already a guarantee. Furthermore, Han Shao had hinted that Floating Dragon would support his actions to obtain the favor of Godora and strengthen their diplomatic relationship. This was not an alliance, but the relationship between Floating Dragon and Godora would be closer than before. There was no harm in having another friend. Ames was respected by many, and she gave Floating Dragon a huge amount of influence. Many organizations gave her face, but this could not change the fact that Floating Dragon was weak. This kind of influence was only on the surface. The forces of the other super experts, on the other hand, all had deep cooperation and interests with many civilizations. They were deeply rooted and their forces were powerful. Han Shao would not go against Floating Dragon's neutral stance. However, being neutral did not mean that they could not make friends. Han Technician was more than willing to help Floating Dragon connect with other organizations. This was originally Jenny's job, but it was clear that this cold woman was too conservative. Han Shao did not mind finding more things for her to do. The stronger Floating Dragon was, the more benefits he would gain. Godora was willing to maintain a good relationship with Floating Dragon, so they naturally understood what Han Shao was hinting at. Godora is grateful for your contribution, and we will not mistreat our friends. The various upper echelons looked at Han Shao deeply. These powerful people in Godora felt that it was time to re-evaluate Black Star's importance. The image disappeared, and only the two of them were left in the room. After obtaining a satisfactory result, Han Shao tossed the mutation source to Nagajan. Take it and send it back to Godora secretly. Don't let anyone steal it halfway. I understand. Nagajan nodded solemnly. He could not wait to see Godora destroy Darkstar's evil plan. Even now, he felt that Han Shao was extremely pleasing to the eye. Han Shao sat on the chair and stretched lazily, feeling relaxed. He had finally handed over the mutation source, and Godora would be able to quickly resolve their predicament. It should be more than a year earlier than in his previous life, and the situation would be completely changed by him. Darkstar was still in the dark. When he realized that the plan that he had prepared for so long had been ruined, who knew what kind of expression he would have? The players would not have to waste time in Blue Star if they completed this main storyline earlier. As a member of the mercenary group, they would be able to create far more value than in his previous life. The experience of the players and the development of the storyline in their eyes would also take a completely different path. I wonder what the future will be like. Chapter 540. There was a sea of people in the sanctuary square. Countless players surrounded Ames, and those who were far away even craned their necks to look inside. They all had different expressions: excitement, curiosity, lust, and so on. After watching Pork Bun's Black Star series, most Blue Star players recognized the Dragon Emperor. Her popularity among the players was second only to Black Star, not only because Ames was beautiful and sexy, but also because she had a pair of long legs that countless men wanted to lick. The players had seen many beautiful female characters, but more importantly, Ames had the aura of a strong person. She was like an emperor, and her status was respected. She was the strongest person that millions of players had ever seen. The huge difference in status caused her popularity to remain high. There were even fans who spontaneously formed Dragon Emperor's Long Legs Liquor Club on the forums. There was no one else who called themselves Liquor Buddies. However, when it came to the name of the fan club, Han Zhao's Black Star's Little Mercenaries and Captain Love Me Again fan club were not much better. The players could only see Ames in videos, but this time, Ames had appeared in person without any warning. Instantly, it caused a tsunami-like commotion in the sanctuary. Countless players called their friends and brought their families to see her in person. Although they really wanted to lick her long, jade-like legs, the players took the initiative to maintain a certain distance from her. Ignoring the fact that they did not have the ability to take off their pants or lick their MP, just the fact that Ames casually flattened a circle of players who purposely got close to her made the others tactfully back off. They did not want to die and lose EXP. What a joke, this was someone who could blow up a star. What if she did not control it well, and blew up the novice village? Ames curiously looked at the endless number of players. These were the space wonders that Black Star had mentioned. They all seemed to know her and were extremely passionate. She felt that these Inhumans were visiting animals. She used her ability to scan the Inhumans, but there was nothing special about their body structure. However, the few Inhumans that she had slapped to death had turned into white light and disappeared, leaving no corpse behind. Her force field was enough to distinguish the differences between millions of Inhumans. In less than 10 seconds, the Inhumans that she had slapped to death had reappeared in her sensing range. They had indeed revived. If these people were immortal, even if they were a little weak, they could still be considered a useful force. This thought flashed through Ames's mind, but she immediately threw it to the back of her mind. At her level, she didn't need to pay too much attention to it. However, Inhumans were indeed quite novel, and they were different from Erosia. It was not a bad thing for Black Star to recruit them. Ames thought to herself. She couldn't see anything for a while. Ames looked around and flew past the crowd to the stronghold that Black Star had told her about. The players in the square had already taken countless photos from all angles. It was a pity that they could not see the bottom of her skirt. Otherwise, the fans of the Dragon Emperor would have been shouting that they could die without regret. After she left, the players excitedly whispered to each other. I didn't expect to see the Dragon Emperor in person. She's so beautiful. I think I'm in love. What a bunch of losers. Just a beautiful woman and you've all lost your morals. No principles and no bottom line. Can't you learn from me? I'll always like Fu Ding. Other than the fans who took fancy screenshots, there were also the hardcore players who guessed the reason for Ames' appearance. That's weird. Ames should be a very high-ranking person. Why would she come to Blue Star? I feel like we shouldn't have come into contact with her at this stage. Is there even a need to guess? It's written on the Wayne cards. Go back and copy the effect of the Black Star card 100 times. As expected of the Black Star network. So what if she's the boss? She can still pull him in whenever she wants. The players all knew that the Black Star mercenary carried the name of Floating Dragon's Armed Forces. They had a deep background and strong backing. The Black Star mercenary was far ahead of the rest, and Ghidorah's taillights could not even be seen. Han Zhao's faction shared the attraction of Floating Dragon to a certain extent. The main reason was because of Ames' charisma. Joining the Black Star mercenary was equivalent to getting close to Ames. This logic had always attracted many hardcore players to join the mercenary group. However, why did Black Star call the Dragon Emperor over? Is it because of the mutation disaster? It can't be. The mutation disaster wouldn't require Ames to take action, right? The players discussed endlessly, and the discussion platform also changed to the forums. Many of the players had high expectations for the main storyline of the mutation disaster and felt that there would be some sort of heaven-shaking twist. These guesses were not baseless, and according to the commotion caused by Ames every time she appeared, she was definitely someone who could create huge news. When Ames was mentioned, it was impossible to avoid mentioning Han Zhao, which allowed him to ride on a wave of popularity. The Planet Aquamarine players felt very proud of the fact that Han Zhao had dragged Ames over, and they looked down on the players from the other novice planet. They had a strange sense of superiority, as if they were saying, "My novice village might explode, can you guys do it?" Nagajan acted swiftly and personally escorted the mutation source to Ghidorah's mother planet. Han Zhao completed the negotiations and headed straight to the mercenary group's stronghold in the sanctuary with a relaxed expression. Along the way, he thought about the future development. No matter how fast Ghidorah's research was, it would still require time. This was not a big problem, and Han Zhao's patience had already reached a level where he would not be in a hurry even if the fish were anxious. I only need to wait. Ghidorah will take about a month to research the antidote, and Darkstar can still be rampant for a period of time. However, with so little time, their plans will not be able to cause any wave. After handing over the mutation source, before Ghidorah could research the antidote, he would be completely free. There was no need to worry about Blue Star's safety. Darkstar's intelligence network would definitely discover Ames. If they dared to create trouble in such a situation, they would definitely be stubborn. What should I do in this month? I don't need to worry about the disaster relief, and the recruitment of players is also on track. In a month, there will not be any huge changes to the mutation disaster. The benefits of the skills that I impart will gradually decrease, and the players will also be leveling up. There will not be as much profit as before. Han Zhao was a little unwilling. Could it be that even he had to join the group of salted fish playing cards? No, definitely not. Even if he was bored to death and jumped down from here, he would definitely not play cards. It seemed like he could only go into seclusion to build machinery. I earned 3 million anas from Ghidorah, and together with the remaining 1,100,000 anas, my funds are now back at 4 million anas. Since I have money now, I can use it to buy some new class knowledge and new combat equipment. Han Shao pondered for a moment before his eyes suddenly lit up. Right, he still had to build a subbase in Blue Star to officially connect with the galaxy and continuously send in new players. Now, he could put that on the agenda. He did not even need to think about the location, and he could just directly transform it into a sanctuary. Bennett would definitely not have any objections. The materials were all ready-made, and some of the important equipment could be purchased from the galactic merchants. As for the construction work, he had millions of ready-made men. Free labor was the real benefit, and he could even issue missions to enrich the players' spare time. Even the strongest leek needed to be constantly watered and fertilized. Using the galactic configuration of base number 1, even the nuclear bombs of the Six Nations would not be able to penetrate the protective shield of the base. This way, I'll have something to do during this period. After making up his mind, Han Shao returned to the Stronghold Hall. Just as he was about to instruct Herluz on this matter, he realized that Ames was already there. Herluz and the other officers were standing at the side, looking very cautious. Even further away, there were many players looking over with excitement. Ever since the players showed that they were strong enough to wipe out the beast horde, the officers returned to the sanctuary to continue slacking off. Under their lead, the Stronghold Hall became a chess room. When the casual players had nothing to do, they would come here to play cards. "You're here." Herluz hurriedly greeted Han Shao. In front of Ames, he felt immense pressure, and he had to consider every word carefully, afraid of offending the Dragon Emperor. Han Shao walked over, smiled at Ames and said, "You've already met the Inhumans?" "You're right. They're very interesting." Ames looked at Han Shao and retracted her aura, no longer testing Han Zhao's subordinate. The pressure on the mercenary officers was instantly lifted, and they heaved a sigh of relief. "I'll get someone to arrange a room for you. I have nothing to do anyway, so I have plenty of time to observe." Ames smiled and said, "Okay." Since she was already there, she naturally would not leave after taking a look at the players. She could also visit Black Star's hometown. "By the way, I used Floating Dragon's name to negotiate with Ghidorah just now. They're very grateful to you. Ghidorah's people should take the initiative to meet you later. I'll make the arrangements." "Okay, do as you deem fit. You seem to care about the abilities of Hela and Aurora. I'll introduce them to you later." "Okay." The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Ames had a casual personality and was not the type to put on airs. Since Han Shao had arranged everything, she accepted it. After interacting with him for the past few days, she was used to using this gentle tone to communicate with Han Shao. Furthermore, she did not hate Han Shao. However, in the eyes of the others, they misunderstood it and were stunned. The Dragon Emperor had always been mysterious. These people did not understand Ames' personality like Han Shao did, and most of them had not even seen this boss of theirs before. In their minds, the Dragon Emperor should be an extremely powerful person, the type that could make one's knees go weak with just one look. There was no way she would be so easy to talk to. Furthermore, she had clearly given them a huge amount of pressure earlier, and it was only when Han Shao appeared that the pressure Ames exerted disappeared. As for Herluz, who had seen the Dragon Emperor a few times before, he realized that Ames' attitude toward Han Shao was completely different from before. She was more than 10 times gentler. She behaved obediently, and her tone was so gentle. She did not seem like the high and mighty Dragon Emperor at all. When she was talking to the officers earlier, she did not use such a tone. Only a blind person would not be able to tell the difference. Could it be that these two people have that kind of relationship? Herluz opened his eyes wide and looked at Han Zhao's back in disbelief. The three Volga brothers opened their mouths wide with a look of disbelief. Fu Ding subconsciously touched his face. At this moment, it was as if a storm was brewing in the hearts of the officers. Harmon felt that the atmosphere was weird. He looked left and right and could not figure out what was going on. The jaws of the players nearby almost dropped to the ground. In the crowd, Pork Bun, who was following and reporting, saw this scene. His eyes lit up, and a light bulb lit up in his head. No wonder Black Star could call Ames over so casually. This was the real reason. The Wayne card did not lie to me. Pork Bun's breathing became heavy, and he instantly thought of a few 100,000 words of plot twists and turns. This is seducing his boss, getting both the person and the money. Even someone of Ames' level was taken in by him. Black Star's charm was simply terrifying. Big news. Pork Bun frantically backed up the recording. An hour ago, somewhere in Blue Star, at the base of the Dark Star undercover team, Black Star left for more than half a month and came back today. I wonder what he went to do. A surveillance officer opened the satellite surveillance footage and casually glanced at it. Suddenly, he felt as if his head had been hit by a hammer, and he trembled from head to toe. He rubbed his eyes and looked at the footage over 10 times. Only after staring so hard that his eyes almost popped out did he confirm that his eyes were not playing tricks on him. His lips trembled. What did I just see? Dragon Emperor Ames? That monster that destroyed a Dark Star mothership with one hit. Quick, 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 report to the higher-up. Urgent news. Chapter 541. What did you say? Dragon Emperor? Degulish's eyes widened, and his Adam's apple bobbed up and down. His chest felt stuffy, as though he had been shot. 20 minutes ago, the hidden team of Blue Star had sent an urgent report. The head of the intelligence department had hurriedly found the current commander of the organization, Deputy Leader Degulish, and reported the situation with a pale face. Ames had appeared in Blue Star. The upper echelons of Dark Star were all shocked. The Dragon Emperor was neutral, but she had suddenly come to the Garten star system. Could it be that she wanted to interfere with Godora? No, the chances were not high. It was most likely that Black Star had called Ames over. But why did she go to Blue Star? Degulish was on high alert. No matter how he thought about it, he still could not figure out Ames' intentions. After analyzing the situation, he felt that there was something strange about this matter. The other party had settled down in Blue Star instead of going to Godora's mother planet to negotiate with the government. It did not seem like she was targeting Dark Star but more like she was here for a vacation. Black Star is the leader of Floating Dragon's armed forces, and I heard that he has been expanding his forces recently. Perhaps Ames is here to investigate the development of Floating Dragon, the head of the intelligence department said. This possibility is the highest. Degulish nodded slowly and said solemnly, Don't let your guard down. We still have a grudge with the Dragon Emperor, and she is a variable in our plan. However, as long as we do not provoke her, she will not be able to do anything to us. Even if she is a super expert, she is just an individual. She will not be able to resolve the current situation. As he said that, Degulish heaved a sigh of relief. He had been frightened by Ames' name and felt that the situation was very serious. However, after thinking about it, he realized that it was not a big problem. So what if the Dragon Emperor was very good at fighting? It would be fine as long as she did not appear in front of her. Could it be that she could resolve Godora's problem with her individual strength? Even a strong person like the Dragon Emperor could not use force to suppress Godora's internal and external problems. She was just one person, and the universe was extremely vast. It was not something that an individual could conquer. Degulish relaxed, and after thinking for a while, he ordered, Get the Blue Star's undercover team to pay close attention to Ames's movements. For now, list Blue Star as a restricted area. No one is allowed to get close to Blue Star. I don't think there was any plan to attack Blue Star in the first place. The intelligence officer was helpless. The scene of one of their assault fleets being destroyed by Black Star was still fresh in his mind. Only an idiot would send someone to die. By the way, how's the plan to plant a mole in the Black Star mercenary coming along? I bribed some freelance mercenaries and got them to apply to join the Black Star mercenary. Black Star does not seem to be recruiting recently, but since they want to expand, the mole I bribed will have a chance to infiltrate sooner or later. As for bribing the Black Star mercenaries, I have not taken action yet, and I am not sure of the details of those Black Star mercenaries. Before I gather enough information and confirm which Black Star mercenaries can be bribed, I am not prepared to alert them. Degulish's eyes flashed and he sneered. Very good. This is a plan to kill two birds with one stone. Not only can we infiltrate the Black Star mercenary, but we can also infiltrate Floating Dragon. The meeting continued for a while. Regarding the threat of the Dragon Emperor, Degulish only ordered his troops to stay away from Blue Star and did not give any other orders. He felt that this was enough. While Ames was strong, she would not affect the plan that the organization had been preparing for a long time. The most important thing now was to continue with the plan. What Degulish did not know was that in a place that he could not see, the situation had changed slightly. He still felt that there was still a lot of time, and the entire Dark Star felt the same way. They escorted Nagajan's fleet back to Ghidorah's mother planet. This was an extremely large planet that was more than 10 times the size of planet Golden Gate. Dozens of military satellite bases surrounded the mother planet, and the security was extremely tight. The spaceship landed, and the War Bureau's senior official, who had already received the news, led a group of subordinates to wait at the dock. The moment Nagajan disembarked, this group of people welcomed him. How's the item? It's perfectly fine. That's great. We don't have time to waste. Let's head to the Research Bureau immediately. Nagajan headed to the Research Bureau's research base under the escort of a large group of guards. There were even 2 other Calamity-grade supers protecting him. The path to the research base was completely sealed off, and even the highest leader of Ghidorah did not receive such treatment. Nagakin carefully made his way to the research base and handed the mutation source over to a group of researchers. They would be researching the mutation source in the research lab with the highest security level, and the secrecy level would be the highest. This would prevent any possibility of the secret being leaked. Nagajan was the key person who had facilitated the transaction with Black Star, and he was allowed to view the results of the research. He waited in the waiting room for half a day, feeling as though he was sitting on pins and needles. Finally, he received the preliminary results of the research on the mutation source. This thing was indeed the main body that had caused the mutation disaster. With the sample that Nagajan had brought back, the research on the antidote would speed up by leaps and bounds. That's great. Nagajan finally relaxed. What he was most worried about was that the sample that Han Shao had given him was useless. Well done. The War Bureau's senior official heavily patted Nagajan's arm. I did not do anything. It's all Black Star's credit. Nagajan bitterly smiled. Never in his wildest dreams would he have expected that the key person to break the stalemate for Ghidorah would be an outsider. The War Bureau's senior official's usually stern face could not help but reveal a smile like a blooming chrysanthemum. Regardless of shape or color, it was extremely similar. Indeed, Black Star has given us a huge surprise. Who would have thought that he would actually be a mercenary? He has really solved our urgent situation. After pausing for a moment, the War Bureau's senior official retracted his smile and solemnly said, "This news must be kept a secret, and we must not leak it out. This is to prevent Dark Star from coming up with another scheme. Maintaining the current situation is the best choice." In order to deal with Dark Star's continuous attacks, the various departments of Ghidorah were so busy that they did not even have time to sleep. Han Zhao's sudden help had given the upper echelons of Ghidorah a huge surprise. Even the highest leader had paid attention to this mercenary named Black Star and wanted to personally give him a thumbs up. The War Bureau had simulated the situation, and the result made many of the upper echelons break out in cold sweat. If Dark Star was allowed to continue unbridled, the situation would only get worse and worse. If this continued for 1 or 2 years, Ghodora's development would be greatly hindered, causing Ghodora's civilization to regress. Half of their achievements in the Garten star system would be lost, and the worst-case scenario would even result in internal strife. Because they knew the consequences, Ghodora's upper echelons were so excited. The sample provided by Black Star could allow them to avoid huge losses, save countless citizens, and turn the entire situation around. Han Shao had become the savior in the eyes of Ghodora's upper echelons. Black Star is an important figure in Floating Dragon. His help can also be seen as Floating Dragon's help. AIM seems to think very highly of him. Perhaps we will be able to benefit from this disaster, and Ghodora will be able to form a relationship with a transcendental organization like Floating Dragon. The War Bureau's upper echelon was excited. He pressed on Nagajan's shoulder, and his eyes sparkled. Black Star's ability is beyond our imagination. You have to maintain a relationship with him. If possible, it's best to take it one step further. Nagajan's mouth twitched and he probed. What do you mean by take it one step further? Make use of the advantage of us Ghodora and become his close friend. The War Bureau's upper echelon said with a serious expression. Nagajan silently raised his sandbag-sized fist, and golden flames shot out from his body. He looked like a certain race member who had transformed. Don't think that I won't dare to beat you up just because you're my superior. Ever since Ames had arrived, the atmosphere in the sanctuary had become very strange. Be it the players, the people in the sanctuary, the Black Star mercenaries, or the people of Ghodora, they were all extremely curious about Ames. Ames did not avoid others either. Her daily life was to look around, and Han Shao was always by her side. Han Shao naturally did not mind being Ames' tour guide. After all, he was very free, and it was rare for the Dragon Emperor to come, so he naturally had to entertain her. Ames was mainly interested in the players, but considering that this planet was Han Zhao's hometown, she was more low-key and did not do whatever she wanted, such as dissecting the players. The people in the sanctuary could often see the two of them walking together on the street. Thinking about the recent rumors, they could not help but look at Han Shao and Ames strangely. Han Shao noticed the gazes of the passers-by. Although he did not show it on his face, he was extremely speechless in his heart. He felt that the group of officers had lost their minds to spread rumors about him and Ames having a special relationship. He did not care about such rumors, but Ames might not. If she was unhappy, she could casually beat up the mercenaries who spread the rumors. At that time, should he help her beat them up, or should he help her beat them up? However, over the past few days, Han Zhao's worries did not come true. Ames did not show any abnormalities. Her expression was normal, and she talked and laughed as usual. Han Shao would not believe that she did not notice the strange gazes of the passers-by. Thinking about it carefully, how could an expert of this level be affected by such simple rumors? Han Shao felt that he was overthinking it. At the same time, he was secretly glad that Ames could not see the player forums. Strange gazes of the passers-by was nothing. The players had already made up hundreds of love and hate stories about him and Ames on the forums. The twists and turns of the plots and the perverted characters made his scalp tingle, his lower body tighten, and his heart ache. The source of all this was Pork Bun's new video. He seriously and meticulously analyzed the relationship between Black Star and the Dragon Emperor. Not only did he have pictures, but he also really said a few things. Pork Bun said it so seriously that even Han Shao almost believed it himself. The players were in an uproar, and the bootlickers were on the verge of exploding. The Captain Love Me Again fan club announced that this was a great victory. Both sides started to argue, and the flames of war spread from the blue star board to the other novice planets. The foreigners only wanted to ask them to let them live and let them continue to talk about the game. Pork Bun had always been a very useful publicity ambassador. This was the first time that Han Shao wanted to strangle him to death. This kind of reporter only wanted to create big news all day, fabricating things out of thin air, making subjective assumptions, ignoring facts, and wanting to see the world in chaos. If a player spread this out and Ames saw it, would he not be afraid of taking responsibility? However, putting aside all those messy guesses, Pork Bun's bootlicker was on point. Han Shao had nowhere to vent his anger, and he actually felt a little comfortable being bootlicker. I really have to give it to you. Han Shao facebombed. He did not plan to open the player forums for the next few days, afraid that his blood pressure would explode. Ames floated beside him, looking left and right. They were shopping as usual today. Han Shao composed himself and looked at the walls of the sanctuary in the distance. The players were climbing up and down like ants, modifying the walls. A few days ago, he had instructed Herluz and Bennett to issue a mission to modify the sanctuary to the players. The modification project officially started, and the players had a new job. They had to show the good tradition of hard-working men who would never complain about being tired. They would transform into building bricks and move them wherever they were needed. Now that the players had a certain level of strength, their efficiency was much higher than when they were building the sanctuary. Han Shao estimated that they would definitely be able to complete the modification of the sanctuary within a month. No wonder you want to recruit the Inhumans. You seem to have a very high position in their hearts. You must value them a lot, Ames said with a smile. There aren't many people in this world that I value. There are only a few billion of them. Han Shao shrugged. Ames's eyes curved, and her lips curled into a beautiful arc. She just laughed twice before suddenly stopping and looking ahead. Han Shao followed her gaze and looked over as well. Hela and Aurora happened to walk past them. They turned around and saw the two of them. They stopped in their tracks and stopped in front of them. In the past few days, Hela and Aurora had been busy testing the infected. They had only heard that Han Shao had brought back a big shot from the universe, but they had not officially met her yet. This time it was a chance encounter. They are the two sisters you mentioned? Ames stared at the two of them calmly. Yeah. Han Shao raised his eyebrows slightly. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.